Broadcasting live from global headquarters at RP Enterprises in Greenwood, Missouri.
Stand by on this frequency.
After 22 years of entertaining FM radio listeners across the U.S., this man is the owner and executive producer of the award-winning Heartland Waterfowl on Sportsman's Channel, CEO and founder of Dumar Chemical Solutions, and the man behind the mic of Papa Ron Radio voiceovers and production. He's the man, the myth, the legend, a global icon, future Nobel Prize winner, and of course he paid me to say all this.
Really?
Literally. Welcome to the Papa Ron Podcast. Here's your host, Ronnie Phillips. Ronnie Phillips.
All right, we're back. It's a special edition. Yeah. So excited for tonight. And though I'm also a little bit nervous because of today's episode, or this week's episode 9 of the Papa Ron Podcast, I have a couple really great friends. I call them great friends, although I don't get to spend as much time with them as I would like. But every time that I am with them, there's this mutual connection that just feels very sincere and genuine and just warms me up inside, and I'm not even exaggerating when I say any of that. I would like to welcome right away. We're just get into it. We're going to welcome right away my friends Greg and Missy Smith. Welcome to the Papa Ron Podcast. How are you?
Good. Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Well, I thank you guys because this is going to be a tough conversation. As a matter of fact, I've thought about how I want to start this, and I've never done this before. And I almost feel like I need to start this podcast with a prayer. Never done that before. I'm uncomfortable doing it, but I just want to say a prayer real quick. And I want to say, Dear Heavenly Father, I want to thank you for bringing all three of us here today and bringing all of the listeners to this podcast this week. I just ask for you giving all of us the strength and the courage and the vulnerability and the trust in you that we are going to be able to have a authentic conversation this evening. And although there's going to be times where this conversation is going to be very difficult, we hope that it will be informative and instructional, and it will be able to provide healing, not only for the Smith family and the people and the friends who are close to them, but also anybody else who may have been connected to Kelsey, their daughter. We also pray that maybe it might, as I said, be informative and instructional for any parent or any person who's suffered from PTSD or any kind of trauma, and that the story that the Smiths might be able to share tonight might be helpful to them. Thank you again for bringing us together. It's all in your glory. Amen.
Amen.
Wow. So, Greg and Missy Smith, the parents of Kelsey Smith. Let's talk about Kelsey. Kelsey was, well, you know what? Let's just do this because this is how I thought I was going to do it. I've normally scripted. I've normally got a little structure here, but we're just going with it tonight. For those who don't know, Kelsey Smith was 18 years old when she was abducted in front of a Target store in the middle of the day, where she was later found dead and murdered and raped. So here's a little clip from the news that took place during that time.
Our top story at 10, a young woman with a promising future is missing tonight, last seen at Oak Park Mall in Overland Park.
An Overland Park family desperate to find their missing 18-year-old daughter.
Kelsey's parents, Greg and Melissa Smith, both join us.
This morning, a desperate search continues. The FBI, police, scores of volunteers, all looking for 18-year-old Kelsey Smith.
The video even shows her paying at a cash register, but at no point does it appear she's being followed. But moments after she passed by this camera, police say she was kidnapped.
It is an urgent effort to spread the word about Kelsey's abduction, and now it's out there in every form of media possible.
You pointed out a certain cell phone tower where police believe the pinging came from as her frantic family tried to get a hold of her on Saturday night. Is that the same cell phone tower that's to your left right now?
I do believe so. We're just on the other side of it. So this was, and they had gotten pings from several different cell phone towers. This was just the last cell phone tower that they got the pings from.
At approximately 1:30 p.m. today, investigators discovered a body in the search area. Pending completion of forensics examination, we have reason to believe that we have found Kelsey Smith.
In this difficult time, we are comforted by the words of Psalm 46. The Lord promises to be an ever-present help in times of trouble. Please keep us in your prayers. Thank you.
Greg and Missy Smith in studio for the Papa Ron podcast, episode 9. And I'm so grateful that you're here. As a matter of fact, Greg is the one who reached out to me because I've done a couple episodes talking about PTSD. We're definitely going to talk about that. Greg has talked about his struggle with PTSD. I'm sure you have some PTSD from what happened to your daughter, but you also, served in the United States Navy. You served in law enforcement for over 20 years. And so you've had your struggle with PTSD. We'll dive into that a little bit later in the show, but let's start off. We know why we're here. Kelsey is what brought us together. Kelsey is why the two of you and I are friends from my days working at Q104 and our involvement as a radio station to help bring the community together during that very difficult time. Let's celebrate Kelsey right now. I'd like to know more about Kelsey. You guys have obviously shared with me on a personal level and private, but let's talk about Kelsey and who she was. Who wants to start?
I will.
Go for it.
So Kelsey was the middle of 5 children. She's number 3. She was born in May of 1989. She had 2 older sisters, a younger sister and a younger brother. So she had a unique position in our family in that she was the youngest for a long time. Mm-hmm. And then she was the middle child once we had the other 2, because she's 6 years older than her younger sister. And then she was the oldest for a while in the home because the 2 older sisters had moved out. And so she had a role in being the youngest, the middle,
and the oldest.
And the oldest, yeah. She had a very outgoing personality, but yet she was very responsible. She had a job at AMC Theaters.
Okay.
When she was killed, and she just a few weeks before, she was given the opportunity for a promotion, but it was really difficult decision for her because her boyfriend John worked at AMC, and so if she took a supervisory role, she couldn't continue to date John.
That was the policy of the company?
Yeah, it was. Yeah. So she decided not to take the position because they were actually going off to college.
Had they been together for a little while?
6 months.
6 months. Okay. So it was still, but I mean, you're 18 years old and sometimes you feel like you're in love after a couple months.
But in this case, I think he and she, it was the real deal.
Good.
I really, really do. Because, I mean, the night that she was kidnapped, she was going out to buy a 6-month anniversary present, which I always say I didn't realize that was a thing. But apparently when you're 18, that's a thing.
Yeah, now they celebrate half birthdays, too. I'm learning that as a dad.
And he was actually had bought her a promise ring for that night. Yeah.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
Do you still keep in touch with John?
I miss that.
I said, do you still keep in touch with John?
I mean, on social media, every once in a while, he and I may shoot just a quick line. Mm-hmm. But I think over time, not nearly as much. But I know at one point in time, not too long after she was killed, because he was a fixture at our house while Kelsey was alive.
Sure.
Daily.
And I think coming to the house without her there was just too painful.
I can understand that.
And, having to come to us and staying in contact with us. He's still friends with our daughter, Lindsay, but that's a constant reminder of what he has lost. And we wouldn't want that burden to be a part of him. I'd sat down with him after she was killed and said, he will find love. And she taught him to love. And we would be okay with him moving on. And she would be okay with him not moving on, but moving forward. You never move on from something like that.
No. You just adjust and adapt, I imagine.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's get to know, so you talked about Kelsey, having kind of a different dynamic, being the youngest, the oldest, the oldest and the middle and all of that. So, and that's what formed her, I would imagine, as a person and her personality. So let's talk about her passions. What were I know you kind of shared with me in the past in private, that she was, kind of a jokester and just would like to have fun and joke around. So share with me her personality.
Well, I mean, one of the things that she used to do it shows two sides of her. There's the side where she really cares about people, and then there's the side where she's just being ornery. Because at school, at high school, any of her friends that had a birthday, she would buy however many balloons they were. So if they were 17, there were 17 balloons to take them to school, and then they had to carry those around all day long.
They're stuck with them. Yeah.
And then one of the last birthdays, she had bought a balloon that if you hit it, it would start playing music. So that was fun going through the school. I'm sure the school was just happy about that.
Right.
And one of the things she would do too is if she would belch, it just drove me crazy.
I remember you telling me this.
Yes. So she would drink a Coke just to be able to burp.
Like a man.
Yeah. And I'd say, Kelsey Ann. And she'd go, Mama May.
Oh, that's good to revisit those stories. Did she, I mean, we were talking before we started the podcast. I'm a big K-State fan. I've got a huge passion for music. I was actually in the band. I actually got a college scholarship to play music in college, at JUCO college, but junior college. But regardless, I had an interest in her story because she did have a big passion for music and was excited prior to her death that she was going to be attending Kansas State University.
Yeah, I mean, it was a big. In fact, senior night in high school during basketball season, they would bring out. She was part of the pep band. She was also part of choir, so she was part of the group that came out and sang the national anthem before the game.
Oh, wow.
And senior night, at that time, I was scorekeeper for the high school basketball team, so I was at all the basketball games. And they would bring them out to center court and say what their plans were for all that. And she wouldn't tell us which college she was thinking of going to.
She kept it a secret.
Not even like you didn't have the top 3 or the top 5.
Well, we knew K-State.
It was either going to be K-State or KU because John was going to KU.
Yeah.
Oh.
And Lindsay was at K-State.
Oh.
Her sister.
So it was kind of a matter of, all right, which one? And I thought she was going to say KU to be with John. And when they finally announced it, it was K-State.
Well, part of the reason for KU also is she went to all of the football games, or quite a few of them, with Greg and her Peppy. So she loved KU football. We really thought she would go there.
That must have been the one year where they were good.
No,
Yeah.
we just
why?
my
And this
dad
is why now she wanted to go to K-State because she saw them getting just annihilated every single weekend. Sorry, I had to do it.
My dad was a lifelong KU fan, and he was a football coach at Shawnee Mission West, and he would go to all the KU games, and he would take me to most of them, and then we ended up getting extra tickets, and Kelsey was like, "Can I go?" And said,
Sure. Well, I imagine if your dad was, you said your dad, right? I imagine if he was coaching at that level, he probably had some kids that he graduated that went on to play at KU. So that was fun for him to go on the weekends, go and watch some of his old players play at Memorial Stadium.
On the senior night, we both walked with her down to the basketball court, and they say Kelsey Smith, and they went K-State, and Greg just looked at her and goes, "What the hell?" It was that much of a surprise to him, and she just got a big old grin like, "Yep."
So you grew up as a KU fan then?
I grew up as a KU fan, and I didn't really become a K-State fan until Lindsay went there, and then Kelsey was going to go there, so it was like,
now you're in.
Yep.
Now you're in. Did you have any allegiance or have a preference? I mean, obviously, if Kelsey goes to KU, then she's closer to home. She's another hour down the road at least if she goes to K-State. So did you have, were you kind of trying to push her in one direction or the other?
Well, I'm an Iowa girl.
Okay.
And not to alienate anyone, but having moved here, I just thought K-State fans were much friendlier. I did not have much
Tell me how it
good
is, Missy.
interactions with KU people.
Okay.
So I was pretty happy that she was going to K-State. Plus, she'd be with her sister if anything happened.
Yeah. Well, and I'll just throw this little nugget at you. If you're an Iowa Hawkeye, is that what you're telling me?
Okay. I grew
she's
up
not
a
an
Hawkeye.
Iowa State Cyclone.
Okay, so if you're an Iowa Hawkeye, Bill Snyder
Yes.
came from Iowa,
Yep.
Yes.
the University of Iowa, before arriving to Kansas State. So
Yeah, it was Hayden Fry when I was
That's
growing
right.
up.
That's right.
Yep.
okay, sorry, I had to take a drink. What other? So she had passion for music. She played the flute or clarinet.
Clarinet.
That's right.
Clarinet.
She was section leader. Her friend Matt, when he became a student in band at Shawnee Mission West, she went over to his house and had all of these like goodie bags and stuff. And Matt was one of those students that was not really outgoing in that, and she just would not let him not be involved.
He was a project.
Yeah. and during band camp, one day at band camp.
That one time at band camp. Here we go.
They all came to our house to eat lunch and everything. She made sure everybody had a way to our house because we just lived a few blocks from the high school, and she made sure that there was sandwich ingredients and stuff so everybody could eat at our house.
What a gal. What a gal. Did she have any other passions besides, I remember, was she just pretty much into music and choir?
I mean, you had band. She was into choir.
Right.
Had
Theater.
Had a beautiful voice. I mean, unbelievable voice. And when she got a couple solos and she was in musicals and she got solos in the musicals and stuff, and she kind of like keep that a secret so that,
that was a secret too.
We'd be sitting there watching and all of a sudden,
surprise.
Yep. She's on stage.
Your daughter's a star.
Yeah.
Wow, that's really interesting because, most kids, I'm kind of guessing here, but I would think I'm trying to put myself in the shoes as, of my daughter or my son, my daughter more so because she's old enough to where I think I know her personality. If she was going to get a lead role in something, she probably couldn't wait to come home and tell her parents. And I don't think that Kelsey was trying to keep something from me. It was probably her just fun way of having fun with you. And I'm going to surprise them.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's
Absolutely.
very interesting. Very interesting.
But, so yeah, she was in theater. She ran track.
Was she good in sports?
And she was an athlete.
She loved to run. Like she would run 8 miles a day, and she would bring our dog back and complain that the dog couldn't keep up.
She ran 8 miles a day.
Yeah, she was long distance runner was her thing. I mean, she just did that on her own, not as a competition.
Not all the time.
Right.
Yeah.
No, I understand.
But she would run almost every day, at least a couple miles.
Wow.
But yeah, she liked to go long distance. And I do remember one time she came home after about 4 miles with our dog that we had, and she goes, "He can't keep up." And she dropped him off,
What kind
and she
of dog?
went back out and took off again.
What kind of dog is it? Was he?
He was a mutt. He was a Lhasa Apso
Terrier.
something.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, I mean,
I was going to say, I was just curious at what kind of athleticism of this dog we're talking about that we're
pound
comparing.
puppy.
Right. Because if it was a golden retriever or a lab or something like that, and she couldn't, and that dog couldn't keep up with Kelsey,
He was a
then
cross between a Lhasa Apso and a lab, wasn't it?
I don't remember.
But it was some weird cross. So you have this tall dog that looks like a Lhasa Apso. So,
Interesting.
Long hair. Yeah.
I was just curious of the athletic nature of the dog breed. That's it.
I wouldn't know.
That's okay. What did Kelsey? You talked about her kind of keeping things a secret from you to surprise you later. Did she take that same route as far as what her career aspirations would be? Like, did you know what she wanted to major in at K-State?
Yeah, I mean, she talked some about, she was interested in medicine, and she talked a lot about human medicine, but she also talked about veterinarian medicine. And at one point she made the comment to me that she would rather not cut people open. So I think she was leaning towards veterinarian medicine, but I can't say 100% that's where she would have gone.
I'm pretty sure that's what it was. She worked also for our veterinarian, Dr. Teeter, at Null Hills Animal Clinic. And her grandfather and grandmother were very much into animals, and she really had a passion for them. And one of her friends, Kristen Griesemer, her maiden name's Griesemer, was going to K-State also to be a vet. And Kristen is a vet now.
She is a vet now, yeah.
Yeah.
And let's face it, I mean, this is probably why she picked K-State, of one of the many great reasons, but they have a great veterinary school.
Yep. Oh,
they do.
Right.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
that
yeah.
probably played into factor with all of that. Is there anything else that you guys would like to share? We're going to talk about a lot tonight, and I've actually, as I didn't have this planned in, premeditated, but as I was sitting here talking, I typically do this show where I stop down, I break, and I throw in a few little commercials. Tonight's going to be different. Tonight, we're not going to do that. We're just going to keep rolling on with the conversation. And so before we move on to, I guess it was June 2nd, 2007.
It was.
Before we get into that dark moment, is there anything else that we can do to discuss and celebrate the life of Kelsey Smith?
Well, I think her car is another one of those hilarious stories.
Put it on me.
So she had a 1987 Buick Regal.
Mm-hmm.
She bought it for $400 from the original owner. It was my little sister's uncle-in-law, and they lived in Nebraska.
Okay.
And my sister called me because she knew Kelsey was looking for a car right before going to London with the marching band. And she said, hey, Bob, Kelsey's uncle Bob, his uncle is selling his car. And I know Kelsey's looking for one. And I said, okay. So my sister describes this car to me. And she says it's a Buick, I think Skylark or something like that. A sleeker, sportier kind of car.
She said it was a Malibu.
And then,
okay. I mean, that sounds cooler, right?
Yeah. And so I told Kelsey, you know, hey, Aunt Rhonda's got this car. Let's go look. If you like it, we'll bring it home. And she's like, okay. So we're about halfway to Doniphan, Nebraska, which is an hour past Lincoln. And my sister's calling me and she's asking, hey, are you guys on your way? Yes. And she said, now, are you sure she's going to be okay with this car? And I said, yeah. I pulled it up. I looked at it for her. And she said, whatever it was, again, the 87 Buick Malibu or something. And I hear my brother-in-law say, no, that's not what it is. It's a Buick Regal. And I knew then this was a big box car.
Yes. Yes.
So Kelsey, I said to her, okay, if you don't like the car, we don't have to get it. We spend the weekend with Aunt Rhonda.
Sure.
But it's $400.
Right.
She loved the car. Like, it became the car.
This big boat that all
Oh, sure. I remember. I actually had a crush on the mid 80 Buick Regals. Yeah. I totally remember that.
We still have the car.
You do?
Yeah. Zach, our youngest son, that was the one thing. That's what he wanted at Kelsey's was the car.
Huh.
So he still has it.
It's gotten a new transmission. It's gotten a new engine, and it needs a new paint job. But it
needs a new bodywork is what it needs.
Well, it's 1984. I mean, do the math.
Right.
I was born in 75, so like it's nearly 35 years old, right?
Yeah. So one of the things
as an antique.
Yeah.
One of the things that happened is her Uncle Bob, he's a mechanic, so he put a new radio in it for her before we left Nebraska. And she got home and went to AMC. I told you she worked there.
Sure.
And her first night driving the car to work, someone broke in and stole her radio.
No.
So then she had to buy another radio, and it was a running joke that she spent as much on radios as she did the car.
I bet you that's true, too.
It is true.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, gosh, that is too funny.
So $400, and she had a car.
And she loved it and took great care of it. And
she did. Yeah.
Is there anything else? Anything else that comes to mind? You know, let me help you with this, because when I did the, and we'll talk about you running for Kansas State Senate, and I was involved with that from producing a campaign video for you. When we made a video for that, you were talking about Nancy Gray. Did I say that right? Nancy Grace? It's Nancy Grace, yes.
Yep.
And she had made a line in one of her TV shows that you felt like kind of epitomized who Kelsey Smith was.
Yeah, she described her in her monologue before the interview with us, actually, and called her said that she was scrubbed in sunshine.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a really good description of Kelsey. And you talk about relationships and people that you meet.
Mm-hmm.
I now am a guest panelist sometimes on Nancy Grace's podcast.
Really?
She does unsolved crimes and things like that, and so I'm part of that.
And if I wasn't nervous enough already to do this podcast, now I know
podcast.
Yeah, but I just want to make it clear that while she was scrubbed in sunshine and was all, fabulous at times,
I didn't say she
had
was
a mouth.
perfect. I
Right.
just said she scrubbed.
She was a teenager with a mouth, and she could get real pissy. And if she was hangry, which happened, oh my gosh,
hangry,
yeah,
meaning that she was hungry.
Her bedroom was downstairs. I built a room downstairs for her own bedroom, And I was down there. At that time I didn't have an office, but I had a computer down there and a desk and stuff like that. And I remember one day she came down and I heard the basement door just boom.
Whoa.
And she's stomping back there and she's into her room and all that. And I'm like, what's going on? And she goes, that woman, your wife. I don't know what they were arguing about, but I was like, she's your mother?
Man, something tells me my daughter's gonna be like that. As you might remember, she was just down here before we started this podcast, and she was talking about my son getting into some stuff, and she says to my wife, Mom, you have a son. He's getting into stuff. Do something, be a mom. Anyway, not to make this about my kid, but I can just see my daughter having the same mouth on her. So I wish that I could have known her, because it sounds like that whoever knew her, whoever encountered her, she made a everlasting, long-lasting impression on them, and she probably didn't know a stranger. She was just that type of person who could walk into the room and then walk away with a room full of friends.
It's funny you say that, because that is what Greg said at her funeral. Yeah, that is pretty much word for word what he said.
Yeah, I wish I could have known her. It did bring us together, and for that I am. I know it feels kind of sick to say it like that, but you know what I'm saying. I'm just honored to call you guys friends. So let's rip off the Band-Aid, as I like to say, and let's get into the meat of it. So it's June 2nd is when this happens, right? 2007.
Yep.
It's the middle of the afternoon. As I understand it, she tells you she's going to go out and, as you said, go get a gift for John. She's going to run to Target. I mean, what time of the day was it when she was abducted?
It was 7:00 in the evening.
Oh, okay. So I was thinking it was earlier in the afternoon, but it was June, bright. So it's bright, sunny outside.
It is bright.
Still sunshine and all that kind of stuff. And actually that day, I had taken the kids to Old Shawnee Days.
Oh, yeah.
And so we'd been at that whole thing, riding rides and doing all that kind of stuff. And that another example of Kelsey's personality, her older sister, Lindsay, does not like heights. But we managed to get her onto the Ferris wheel. I mean, just the Ferris wheel. You know, this is not any wild ride or anything like that. Kelsey is in the gondola with Lindsay. And as it gets to the top, she starts
rocking it
like that. And she looks back at me. I'm behind him, and she's looking back at me, and she goes, "She's," you know,
yeah.
And she thought it was hilarious.
Did you think it was funny?
What's that?
Did you think it was funny when she was doing that?
I thought it was absolutely hilarious.
I mean, was there ever times where you were like, okay, because it sounds like this was like you just never knew what to expect from her. Maybe like she wasn't predictable. Let's just say she was unpredictable with her sense of humor.
With her sense of humor, but also very responsible. One of the reasons when everything happened with her that the police took us seriously is if Kelsey was running late, she would call or text or something and always let us know where she was. We had a rule in our house. If you were late, you were grounded 2 days for every minute you were late.
Wow.
It only takes once.
Mm-hmm.
You know, she was at the park one day and had come home to the front yard, but didn't let us know. And so she was late, and I was like, "You're grounded." And she's like, "Wait a minute." And I said, "Nope, you didn't tell us. Like, you're late."
Yeah.
So it just takes one time.
Love hearing parents who hold their kids accountable. That's really cool.
Yeah.
Which I feel like is something that's lost in society today, but that's a whole nother show.
So yes, very unpredictable in ways like that, but very predictable and very, very responsible.
Sure.
Yeah. I mean, had a great work ethic and, you know, all that kind of stuff. So.
When, June
2nd. Yep.
June 2nd, 2007. This is where I'm going to be challenged as a podcaster to ask the tough questions, being I'm a new podcast host. She goes and she doesn't come home and you can't get a hold of her. I don't know where you'd like to start, but what are the walk me through the events of that evening?
Yeah, we got back. Like I said, we went to Old Shawnee Days. We got back. I was making dinner. Missy was actually out of town. She was in Iowa. One of her friends' kids was getting married, and so she was up there for that wedding. And Kel said, hey, I'm leaving. I got to. There were still, I don't know, graduation parties. It was 9 days after she graduated from high school. So she was going to a pool party someplace, and then she was going to come back and meet up with John, and they were going to go out for dinner or whatever. And so she comes home because she forgot a CD that she wanted in her car. And she said, hey, I'm going to Target. I got to get John's gift, and I'll be back. Love you, Dad. See you later. And I said, okay, I love you, baby. And that's the last time I talked to her. She was out the door. Missy talked to her on the phone at Target because she was looking for a certain gift, and Missy knows where everything is in any store in the Kansas City metro area.
My wife is the same way.
So they were actually on the phone. So Missy's the last one that actually, from our family, that actually had any kind of conversation with her.
So she was looking for a box for John, like to keep his cards and stuff in that she had given him.
Gotcha.
His mom had accidentally thrown away a card Kelsey had written to him. Yeah, I see the look on your face. Oops, big oops. So she was going to get him a box that he could keep everything in so his mom would not throw it away.
Yeah.
It was more...
So that's like the diary that you don't open, you don't touch, you just stay away from, right?
Yeah,
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So she called me to say, hey, Mom, where is this box in Target? And I said, well... I told her where I had seen it. I was at a different Target when I saw it. And so she goes, no, I'm not at that Target. I'm at the one by the mall. So we knew exactly where she was when everything happened. Mm-hmm. And I told her, go look in scrapbooking aisle and you can probably find it there. And she said, okay. And we talked for a few more minutes. She was only in the Target 11 minutes. So I said to her, bye, baby. See you when I get home. Because I was on my way home from Des Moines.
You were driving back?
Well, that's another one of those where God protected me because I was in Des Moines, took our van that nothing had ever been wrong with it. And I'm getting ready to leave and my car isn't working right. So my dad looks at it and he's like, honey, your engine's gone. And I'm like, what do you mean my engine's gone? So my girlfriend drove me home from Des Moines.
Wow.
And that's when I got the news that Kels wasn't coming home, or not coming home, but she wasn't home. Lindsay called me and said, hey, Mom, have you heard from Kels? And I said, well, she was at Target. And I said, call John. She's supposed to meet John.
Yeah.
And Lindsay said, Mom, John's here. And Kelsey's not answering her phone. And my immediate response was, tell your dad called the police. Something's wrong.
Yeah.
We knew. We just knew from her, the way she was. Something was wrong.
I can't even imagine as I'm doing this interview, I'm trying to put myself in your shoes, and it's just absolutely impossible because I can, as a parent, I can have the fears and I know that there's evil in the world, but until something like that actually happens, like you try to run through your mind when you hear about these stories and like, how would I respond? How would I act? You think you would respond a certain way, but you just really don't know. Or I personally don't know that I would do exactly what I think I premeditated would do until I'm in that moment.
Well, it's probably kind of like, I remember seeing your parents were going through the tornado situation.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
And you couldn't get a hold of them.
So what Missy's talking about is my hometown is Marysville, Kansas. And a couple of weeks ago, a tornado hit our town. My dad and I were in Arkansas on a fishing trip. It was kind of a Father's Day weekend getaway. And when we got the news that Marysville had been hit in town with a tornado and there had been damage, we were naturally trying to get a hold of the loved ones back home to see if everybody was okay. But the cell towers were down for a short period of time. And we couldn't get a hold of anybody, so it was immediate anxiety.
So when I read that, that's what I thought.
Really?
I thought of Kelsey and that angst that you have and that unknown and just trying to do anything and everything you can to hear from them. That's where we were. So you kind of do know what we were going
Well, thanks for putting it into perspective for me because, I think it would be different, though, if it's your kid.
Probably,
I don't want to say I don't love my mom. I love my mom, but I think it would be different if it's Reagan, like it's my child. She's still living under my roof. I'm still her guardian. It's my responsibility. Right. This is what I'm thinking in my head. It's my responsibility to keep her safe. Those are all the emotions and the things that I'm going to be thinking. So I think the dynamic would be just a tad bit different. So So she's missing, and you know, you're hopeful. You're hopeful that, okay, maybe something crazy has happened and she's going to walk in the door. She's going to be late, and man, we are going to ground her. You know, like you're hopeful that that's what's going to happen. But then the night comes and the night goes and the next morning comes and she's still not there. And now you're probably really on high alert.
We were on high alert that evening.
Yeah, I mean, it didn't take long before
it didn't get worse. I'm only asking because I'm trying to like put myself in your shoes. Like you're kind of thinking as a parent, like you said, she's responsible. She's always done, but you got that hope that she's still going to come home tonight. And when she does it, and the next morning comes, I would think for me, that's when you go, whoa.
There were stages involved because, like, when after the conversation that Missy had with Lindsay saying, well, you know, Kelsey's not here yet, John's here, we don't know where she is. We knew that she'd been at the Target. So Lindsay and John drove out to the Target. It's, I don't know, 8 minutes from our house. It's not that far.
How long ago was this after she wasn't where she needed to be?
Maybe
because
30
the car did eventually come back to that vicinity at the mall across the street that night, right?
Maybe 30
but
minutes.
But the car,
so
the car wouldn't have been back yet then.
Yeah, 30 minutes she hadn't been home when she was supposed to, which was very unusual. One of the things that was running through my mind was that same school year, that 87 Buick starter quit.
Oh.
Right.
And it broke down on her after a football game, and she was stuck. And so I thought, well, it's an old car. Maybe something happened to it. But when I was calling her on the phone and texting her, she wasn't answering me. And even if there was something going on where, you know, she and I weren't seeing eye to eye, she would not ignore a text from me or anything like that. And you got to remember, too, this is 2007 and cell phones aren't ubiquitous. I mean, they aren't, you know, a part of our daily life like they are now. They were for an 18-year-old. But,
sure.
I mean, that was back when you had to pay for text messages.
Yeah, you didn't have the screen where you could get online and there, you know, do the Facebook stuff and the social media. It was a
phone and you could text.
And that was it. And that was it. Well, maybe play a game like bowling or something like that.
And texting, you had to push 1 like 3 times to get the A, the B, the C.
Yeah, there wasn't a
key. Oh, yeah.
You know, you were doing the phone keyboard.
The flip
there
phone.
wasn't an alpha.
It was a flip phone.
Keyboard.
Yeah.
Let me ask this, and this is kind of a curious technical question, but did there come a point where, I'm guessing you guys never stopped calling, right? Every hour, every day, until she was found, you just never gave up. Was there a time where the phone rang and rang and rang and rang and never answered, went to voicemail, and then it came to the point where the phone is dead and it's just going to voicemail?
Yes.
Yep.
Wow.
But anyway, when we weren't getting a hold of her, John and Lindsay go out looking. I called, or maybe Lindsay called, I don't remember now, but got a hold of my parents. They lived out near the Oak Park Mall and the Target and all that kind of stuff. So my parents are driving around. I'm talking to Missy again on the phone saying, hey, you know, something's not right. And I'm calling police departments because I'm a local officer at the time. So I'm calling different departments saying, hey, have you had contact with this car? You know, has there been an accident? Calling every department around the area from Overland Park, and nope, we haven't had a traffic stop. We haven't had anything with it.
And then Greg's parents got to the mall, and his mom called me and said, hey, does Kelsey's car have a Nebraska license plate on the front? I told you she bought her car from her uncle-in-law in Nebraska. And I said, it does. And she said, it's near the Macy's store at the mall. So then Greg had spoke to Lindsay and John, and they went right to the car.
Timeline now, where are we at in the time of the day? 2 hours later?
2.5 hours after she went missing, or after I talked to her on the phone. So almost immediately.
What was the time from when she had walked out of Target to when she was, quote unquote, missing?
Well, how much time did it actually take, or how long did it take before we actually knew she'd been abducted?
I guess what I'm saying is, at what time did you start? When was it that you were starting to ask questions like, why haven't we heard from her?
Yeah, because it happened
it happened at 7-Eleven.
Just a few minutes after 7, and she was supposed to be with John by 7:30.
7:30.
I think they were supposed to go out at 7:30. So
okay, so then from 7:30, 30 minutes later, or 2 hours later, that car's back in the parking lot.
Yeah.
Right.
Wow.
Yep.
Right.
Okay. So then you're going naturally to the car.
Right. And I called the police. I had called the police and told them, I said, hey, that we found the car, told them where it was. And so they were on their way to meet us out with the car. So
I think that was about 10 that we got
9:45, 10 o'clock, somewhere in there. So anyway, but we all converged, and there's the car.
But one of the things that where Greg was, in all honesty, the hero in her case is John wanted to get into her car, and Greg said to Lindsay, no one opens that car, you do not touch it, which saved the fingerprint of the person that killed her.
That's where I was going to go next with this. Was there, when you got there, and smart on you, naturally you would know that, with all the years that you served as a law enforcement officer. So awesome that you were able to recognize that. But I'm guessing, if again, I'm trying to put myself in your shoes, a loved one, I'm finding my daughter's car. I want to know, like, I'm looking in the windows. I want to see at least, what can I see? Does anything look suspicious? Did anything look suspicious from the outside?
Before we got to the car or started looking in the car, I was walking around the mall. We all were. We were looking in dumpsters. We were looking behind bushes because her car's there. Did she get hurt? Did someone hurt her? Where was she?
Sure.
And the first officer on the scene, Officer Coos, I said to her, I have looked in every dumpster and behind every bush and I can't find my baby. And Michelle said to me, when she heard that, she knew something bad has happened. And then the police were at the car, and Greg pointed out to him something's hanging out from the trunk. And so we're standing there waiting for them to open the trunk of her car. And in some ways, you're praying that she's there, but in other ways, you're praying that she's not. And then when she wasn't, there was just, my stomach fell because, again, where is my child?
Naturally. Sure. Was there anything suspicious? This is her
there,
car that she loves.
It's like a paper hand strap from a grocery bag or something hanging out the back of her car, which
that would never happen with Kelsey.
Would never happen with her driving the car. Nothing would hang out of the trunk. I'm not saying the inside of the car was clean. We're talking a teenage girl.
Sure.
It was a disaster.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
The way you talked about it, I thought it was going to be like impeccable. Like,
no.
Pristine.
But there would not be anything hanging out where people could see it.
Sure.
So my immediate concern was that she was in the trunk. And then the police are doing the opening and that, and I'm doing this.
Oh my gosh.
While they're opening the trunk, and I kind of looked and she wasn't there. Like Missy said, though, there was a relief that she wasn't there, but my whole countenance just fell because she wasn't there.
Do we know why the bag was hanging out?
Still don't know.
There was nothing.
Would have been. I don't know if the guy that killed her was rummaging through the trunk looking for stuff, and it just happened to hang out. I don't know. I don't have any idea.
Well, and she had just loaned the car to her uncle because my little brother came in from Georgia to see her in her final performance at the high school. And then he wanted to go see family in Nebraska a few weeks before she was killed. And she's like, oh, Uncle Tim, you can take my car. And he was like, are you sure? And she said, yeah. So she had taken, those yellow trash bags.
Yep.
She had 2 bags full of stuff that she emptied out of the car for him to borrow it. So
she was trying to clean it up a little bit so she wasn't so embarrassed.
Yeah.
Gotcha,
So I don't know if maybe, when she got it back, if she was throwing stuff in there, who knows?
Yeah.
So the car's back, and they're naturally, I would think the forensics team is going to show up now, and they're going to dust the heck out of it.
Yep.
Now, I don't know anything about that. I've watched a few CSIs, and a few movies. Is it like what you see on TV in the movies? They take the tape and they basically clear off the scene, make sure nobody can come within that parameter. And there's people there in white suits, and they're in there with masks, and they're doing all the tests and the black lights and all of that stuff. Were you allowed, being a former officer? Actually, you were still doing service. Were you allowed, being that you were this close, they wouldn't let you in?
No. I mean, one, it wasn't that wasn't my agency, so I didn't have jurisdiction. Even if I had, they wouldn't have let me participate. But for me, and I tell this because, like tomorrow morning, I'm speaking at the National Sheriff's Association conference about her case, and I go all over the United States now and talk to police officers about her case and what happened and things to look for and that kind of stuff. And I was operating in two realms. I would shift to law enforcement, and I tried to stay there as much as possible because if I did that, I could block the emotions out.
Yep.
Because if I came back to being Kelsey's dad, that was a place I really didn't want to be.
Yeah.
So I did spend a lot of time in the law enforcement mode. The downside to that, though, is they would call during the investigation, during the 4 days where we didn't know where she was, and ask questions, like what color shoes did she have on, or, things like that, because they had found something somewhere, and I know what all these questions mean when they're asking me and none of the outcomes are good. So that was a rough time for me, was switching back, in between those modes.
Where a normal person wouldn't really understand the reasoning for the questioning. You being
what did she have to eat? And I'm thinking, okay, now we're talking stomach contents. What's going on? That kind of stuff.
Wow.
But that night we were standing there watching them put on the white suits and bagging everything in her car, and it was very surreal. And they said, you guys can go on home and we'll get in touch with you. And I looked at Greg and I said, oh, hell no, we're not going home. We're going to the police station. They're going to question us. They're going to talk to us right now so we can find out where our kid is. So we go to the police station and they put us in a room, and he's pointing out all the cameras to me, and he's like, they're watching me. And I said, I don't give a shit if they're watching me. I don't care. Like, get in here and ask me what you got to ask me.
Yeah, let's get it all out there. Yeah. So how long does it take in a situation like in this particular case where, I mean, you're not just dusting the handles, you're dusting the entire car. And when I say dusting, you're trying to get fingerprints, you're trying to get something or, find just some sort of evidence. What is all involved? How long does it take before you get any kind of answers? And is the process faster today than it was 15 years ago? I
mean, in some ways it's changed a little bit, but at the scene, you have a preliminary crew that comes in and does kind of a general search for things that could easily be discovered. Then her car gets towed to the Johnson County Sheriff's Office crime lab, and there's a whole another battery of tests.
So the real detailed stuff is when it's already towed off, though. They're not doing that in the parking lot.
I mean, all the DNA and stuff like that, that's done at the lab.
Gotcha.
But fingerprints originally are tried to be left at the scene. But the other issue you have is that dust goes everywhere. And so you have to be careful. You have to be strategic about where you dust, because the dust could get into something that may be DNA that you need later, and you may have damaged it. So, I mean, there's so many considerations that come into play when they're looking for that kind of evidence.
But what ended up happening is they did the super glue test, where they basically set off a super glue bomb in the car, because super glue, the fog will adhere to maybe something the powder didn't.
Oh, wow.
And that's where they
bring
found
up fingerprints.
That's where they found the fingerprint.
You say fingerprint as in singular. There was only one fingerprint.
There was one identifiable print that was his, that was on the driver's seatbelt.
That we're talking the metal that in the 87 Buick.
Yep.
The clip.
So that metal clip that you pull down, that's where they found it.
That actually snaps in. That's where the fingerprint was at. And then they found the seatbelt guide. There's a big plastic piece on those old Buicks that the seatbelt actually kind of, it's a trough that it sits in.
I remember.
There was DNA. His DNA was found in there. So, there were just different places that they found different things. But the science has gotten better over time. But it was amazing even back then what they found. I mean, one of the officers I was talking to was talking about, I know that John and Kelsey got along. And I said, how's that? And he goes, because this water bottle has both of their DNA on the lip. So they were both drinking out of the same bottle.
Okay.
My DNA was on the
armrest
in the middle, because I had driven the car and I rested my arm on the armrest, so they pulled my DNA from the car.
Wow.
So I mean, there was DNA that was pulled from the car that they never could identify, and who knows who that it could have been when her Uncle Tim took it someplace and somebody that he knew got in the car and rode with him. So it's just a lot of things.
Doesn't that complicate the case a little bit?
It did. I mean, that was a line that the defense ran with, where they were trying to say, well, he wasn't alone. There was more than one suspect. He wasn't the one that committed the murder. That kind of thing.
Sure. So, how long did it? So you got the print right away, the one print.
No, not right away.
Not right away.
No,
that was after. That didn't come until day 4.
Yeah.
Yep.
Then that would have been after they found that print, after they took the car to the Johnson County Police Department,
right?
Yes.
To the crime lab.
And then Johnson County actually had to do the matching. To make sure that all the points match, they had to, and to do that, you have to have the suspect's print, which that in and of itself is kind of an interesting story. Kelsey's body was found on June 6th. The suspect was arrested on June 6th. When he was in for questioning with the police, he had his lawyer with him, and both he and the lawyer gave permission to have fingerprints taken and to have swabs done to get DNA. I mean, the lawyer was, okayed it, and suspect okayed it. And during the time before he kidnapped Kelsey, he had been at the On the Border restaurant there in Oak Park Mall, and he basically was being real rude to the waitress, saying inappropriate things and stuff like that, and they were tossing him out. Well, in that whole situation, he also did a dine and dash. And so he leaves and doesn't pay for his lunch. So at the time, we still didn't know he was the guy that had done anything. So the police are going to hold in fact, the detective that on the case told me this. He said, yeah, we came in and told him, well, we're booking you on the theft of services from the restaurant. And he said that this guy actually just kind of laughed. He says, really, that's all you got? I'll be out in an hour. And another officer comes in to walk him out to the car to take him to jail. And somebody runs in and says, we got a match. We got a fingerprint match. His fingerprint's in the car.
Whoa.
And so that detective walked out and let him know, said, I got your fingerprint in the car. And then he just exploded and just started swearing and cussing.
So he got angry.
Yeah.
Angry and denial? Well,
I think the way that the detectives described it to me, he thought the suspect thought he was the smartest guy in the room. He really thought he was going to walk out of there and nothing was going to happen to him.
So one of the things that came out later, and this is probably part of the reason that and we say he or him, because as we told you, we don't say his name. Kelsey matters. He doesn't matter. One of the things he had done that we learned was he went back and bleached her body. So he's thinking there's not going to be any DNA and no way of tying it to him because he had bleached her body.
Okay, so now my mind is racing with a million different thoughts.
Sure, ask us anything.
Wow. So first question, was he intoxicated? If he was acting up at 7:00 at night, roughly, he's On the Border. He's obviously, not getting his way. They, as you described it, threw him out.
I don't think so, because he had been, we found out later.
That's what I'm saying. Did it ever come out?
He had been scouting the mall all day looking for someone.
He was trolling, looking for women. And again, at the time, we didn't know all of his history, but after the fact, we find out that this was a habit of his, that he would go up and accost women at the mall and try to pick them up.
I think that's how he met his wife.
That's how he met his wife. So,
but previously, there was a woman at the River City Market here in Kansas City, Missouri, who had been assaulted and ended up needing surgery on her hand. At the time she was assaulted, she reported she reported it to the police, but didn't know who it was because it was a stranger. When everything happened with Kelsey, she called the police to say, that's the guy that did this to me.
Wow.
And she was able to get away, and the difference being between the two cases, exact same scenario where he tried to grab her at the car, but with her, the first woman, she had not opened the car door yet.
Right.
And she was able to turn around and fight back and get away from him. With Kelsey, he waited until the car door was open, and she's sliding into the driver's seat, and she's totally defenseless. And so there's nothing she can do.
So now the next question, because as I said a moment ago, my mind is racing. We don't know if he was intoxicated. That's where my first thought was when you talked about him getting kicked out on the border. Then you brought up bleaching the body. So from the time she was roughly about the time she was abducted, if I can say the word, till the time that we know the car's back is roughly 2 hours, right?
Correct.
Okay. So he abducts her in her own car. Correct.
Yes.
Okay. So does he then go do the crime and then somewhere in the Longview area, because this has happened in Longview Lake, right? He goes and gets the bleach, comes back, and then brings the car back?
Next day.
Next day, he drove out there to bleach the body. And again, we didn't know this at the time. This is stuff that comes out afterwards
and
through the investigation.
This is something that he eventually admits to or tells the whole story?
He did admit to it, but the thing that even got the police looking that way was the day after, he's coming out of the woods there at Longview Lake, and he's got a duffel bag. And there's a couple that's walking on those walking paths in there that see him coming out, and the guilt thing kicks in. He's afraid, somebody's going to wonder why the hell I just came out of the woods. And so he's telling them, oh, yeah, I'm an amateur photographer. I just got my gear. I was just back there taking pictures. And the couple remembers him, because they had this conversation with him. And so they put that together, and the fact that when they found Kelsey and they're doing the forensic exam of her body, there's bleach on her body.
And her clothing.
The T-shirt that she wore that she had on that day was pink. But now it's white because that's what he used as a bleach rag. And
wow. Oh, wow. So 4 days later, you get the print, and the print's really what solves the case, right? Because of because he had gotten in trouble on the border. Thank you. And so did they call the police on him on that deal, or did they just kick him out?
They just kicked him out. Then they called later. They didn't call at the time that it actually happened. That was later that they called the police, because he left a dummy wallet on the table.
Right.
To try to throw him off of who.
So the dine and dash, that was actually premeditated to where he brought a dummy wallet. Wow, jeez. Yeah. Okay.
Well, and I think when his picture started being shown on TV is when they called in also to say, "Hey, this is the guy that was here."
Gotcha.
I mean, once he became a person of interest, once they had the video of him going in and coming out of the Target. That circulated on the news, and that generated a lot of tips coming in with people calling and saying, hey, I think I know that guy.
It's kind of a domino effect after a snowball effect.
Right.
Whatever you want to call it.
So many that
the tips
crashed.
Crashed for a while. They had so many tips coming in they couldn't keep up with the volume of the calls coming. But yeah, he's a guy that when they start investigating, he's got a history. He's done some violent things in the past. He's went after his sister with a knife.
A neighbor.
Went after a neighbor with a baseball bat,
So bad that his adoptive parents returned him to the state.
So, there's all that going, but
again, that's no excuse for what he did.
Not at all. No, not at all.
No.
I mean, we're just basically stating that the guy had a track record.
But I mean, she goes missing at 7:30 on a Saturday night, and we don't know what happened. I mean, there's no indication by looking at the car that anything happened in the car.
That was the next question I guess I was going to have. There was no sign of struggle or no blood. There was no...
I mean, the packages and stuff that she had bought at Target were still on the passenger
and her
seat.
purse, just not her keys and her phone.
They were just sitting there in the car. So
that's kind of where we were.
Yeah. I'm sitting here trying to host a podcast, and I'm like, damn, I don't know what to ask next now.
The next thing I was going to say is that evening, in my front yard. John, her boyfriend, his uncle had worked, I think it was for Sprint. And he said, he called me ma'am because he already had a mom. He said, ma'am, my uncle said you can ping her phone. And I was like, okay. So I'm calling our cell phone provider at the time, saying, hey, can you ping her phone? And they're like, we can't do that. And that's where the Kelsey Smith Act thought.
Definitely want to get into that.
Yep.
Definitely want to get into that. And so that was another key component to locating the body. Right?
It was, absolutely.
Naturally, the fingerprint was what helped identify who the suspect could be.
Right.
But now we need to find the body.
Right.
Because he's in denial, or at least he's fighting it. And he's not admitting to anything.
That was kind of a simultaneous thing that was happening at the same time.
Yeah, I do remember that.
She was found about the same time he was arguing with the police.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So that was the fourth day. Both things are happening.
So was there when, and we're definitely, because it's so important to this story to talk about the cell phones and the pinging of the cell phones, but I guess I just want to know if once they found the body, was there any other evidence, because he's the brilliant one, right? He thinks he's the brilliant one who's like gotten rid of any sort of evidence by bleaching the body. Was there any evidence that he left behind that would connect him? Okay.
There was still DNA.
I mean, forensic evidence. It's not like he left, a knife or, anything on the scene. He didn't carry anything there and leave it other than.
Well, one of the other things that many people don't know is her body was covered in some sticks, and they thought it was a satanic kind of thing. And there were sticks in the back of his truck, and they were comparing those with the ones with her body. They were comparing ticks that he had that they removed from him to ticks on her body. There was what is the name for a
Wait a minute. The
bug?
guy had ticks on him 4 days later?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So
actually, in his case, what had happened is the night that he kidnapped Kelsey,
right?
He brings the car back, drops it off at the mall instead of at Target. His truck's still in the Target parking lot. So he has to go over to Target, get in his truck, and he drives home. He lived in Olathe at the time. And then the police have a record, again, through the investigation, that 10:30 or so that night, he's called Dial a Nurse to ask how to get a tick off his body.
Right.
He's calling who?
Dial a Nurse, ask a nurse.
Oh, what?
Just, hey, I was out in the woods today. I got a tick on my body. How do you take a tick off?
But I believe they still found one when they brought him in. And then when you ask about evidence, they found Kelsey's DNA on the inside of his shorts mixed with his wife's, whatever that tells you.
Yeah.
And when they brought him in, they had been watching him, but he and his wife were putting a lot of things in their vehicle, and it looked like they were leaving town. So the police pulled them over. He had made arrangements to come in and speak to the police, but because it looked like they were fleeing, they arrested him at the time. And
they stopped him right outside his house. And then when they do the search of the car, after they got the warrants and everything, the clothing that he wore during the assault of Kelsey, he had packaged in bags and was in
individually
his luggage.
bags. Like his shorts were in one, the shirt in another, and shoes.
They were all separated, like they were already bagged for the police.
Right.
So I can't make sense of that. Did they ever ask him why? Was he intending to get rid of it later?
He was probably trying to get rid of him,
and he just did, and he ended up incriminating himself because he did hold on to it.
I mean, the DNA, Kelsey's DNA, like Missy said, was found inside his shorts that he had, and the chances of it being somebody else than Kelsey at the time, I was just looking at this today, was 1 in 280 billion that it wasn't her.
Well, and
wow.
Since it was 15 years ago, that was when they were first starting to differentiate between the XY DNA, and her case was sent off. It was one of the very first ones to tell if it's familiar or
female.
Yeah, female or male DNA. So that was one of the very first cases.
Really?
Cell mark?
It's YSTR marker.
Yeah.
Okay. So was he, let me ask this now, man. It appeared that they were fleeing. Were they in fact fleeing?
I don't know.
I think they were, but
so let me ask it a different way. Does the wife, is she part of the trial? Does she get interviewed in the trial?
Well, she's there every day.
Do they ever ask but is she put on trial?
Well, there never was a trial because the defendant decided he was going to plead guilty.
Gotcha.
Because there were all kinds of hearings and stuff on who was going to prosecute the case. Was it going to be Kansas? Was it going to be Missouri? Was it going to be the feds? And there was supposed to be a hearing on change of venue because his attorney said we can't get a fair hearing in Kansas. They probably couldn't have gotten one pretty much anywhere. But the day before, Greg and I were at the U.S. Attorney's in Missouri because I wanted to know, why are you not taking this case? This is
because
a
the crime
case.
happened in Missouri. Yeah.
Well, he crossed state lines and it's a kidnapping.
Exactly. Yes.
And basically what the U.S. attorney had said was, well, we were assured by the district attorney in Johnson County that they would prosecute this to the fullest extent, and he's just feeding me all this hogwash. And I looked at him and I said, you mean you didn't have the balls to prosecute this?
Mm-hmm.
And so it got somehow, from our understanding, the defense attorneys found out we were at the U.S. attorney's office. And everybody knows if you're at the U.S. attorney and it gets prosecuted that way, the death penalty means death. So what was supposed to be a change of venue hearing ended up being he pled guilty.
Wow. Okay. I don't know where to go from there. I did have a question though. So he pled guilty. Obviously, there's not a trial then, so I screwed that all up. But
his wife was with him.
He was with him. She was with him at the hearings. Yes, hearings, but she had to have been interrogated by the police. What I'm ultimately trying to figure out is, did she ever rat him out? Did he ever tell her, I did something wrong, we got to pack up, we got to get out of here? It sounds like if she knows something, she never said anything.
No, because she actually got kicked out of the county jail for flashing him. She was
What?
Yeah, visitation days. She's
okay. So this is after he's incarcerated.
Yeah, and we're going through all the hearings. I mean, we haven't even had a trial yet. We're just going through evidentiary.
He's not even gone to prison yet.
Well, he hadn't even pled guilty yet. This is just during the.
Okay, and she's flashing him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So does she go to jail for this, or what happened?
No, they just.
I don't know.
They just banned
But
her.
they allowed her to keep coming to the trial.
No, well, to the trial, yes.
That's what the hearing.
Yeah. She lost visitation privileges at the jail.
And they have a child together, right?
Correct.
Draconis, which means from the fiery pits of hell.
Yeah. Okay, so he at some point then what is it that he's denying it? He's fighting it. At some point, something must have happened to where he comes clean. What did it take for him to come clean with it?
Well, it was just what Missy said. Somebody, and to this day, I don't know who it was, somehow or other, the news got back to the defense attorneys that we were at the
it was
US.
It was that pushed him.
And then the next thing we knew is, hey, we want to plead if you'll take the death penalty off the table.
Gotcha.
It was a death penalty crime in
Now
Kansas.
I'm understanding where you're going with that. Okay.
From what we've been told, it was told to his attorney, the Smiths have seen the U.S. attorney, and death means death if the feds prosecute. And his attorney told him, you better do this.
Gotcha.
In fact, it was such an influence on him and on the defense team that when they were doing the plea bargain agreements on what he would plead to and all that kind of thing, the defense asked the district attorney at the time and said, and we would also like a promise that the feds won't come and prosecute this, because they could still have done it regardless. And the district attorney at that time for Johnson County looked at him and said, I don't control the feds.
As we were leaving the U.S. attorney's office, there were some staffers who are career U.S. attorneys, not the appointed people. And they said
they wanted to take the case.
Yeah, they pulled us aside and said, if you don't feel as if you've got justice, you come see us.
Do you feel like you got justice?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. So what is his sentence?
It is a true life without parole. I mean, he's there until he dies.
Okay.
Now I feel like I got justice, but I will tell you, when they were pleading, I brought pictures of Kelsey. I threw them at the district attorney. I threw them at all kinds of people. And I said, you fight for her as hard as she fought for her life. Don't you give in. And a friend of ours who was a career prosecutor in Jackson County, Kansas City, Missouri, he said to me, you want this? And I was like, no, I don't want this. And he said, you want this because after today, you are done with him.
Yeah.
And we are.
Yeah.
We have no appeals.
We're not like those families that have to go back every 10 years for a hearing on possibly they're getting, parole, probation. He's not eligible for that. He's there.
Sure.
And our daughter Lindsay had an influence on that too, because she said, Mom, I need you to be okay with this because I need to be able to move forward. I don't want to have to deal with him. I don't want my kids to have to deal with him
for
the rest of their lives.
Absolutely. What so he finds out that, man, I might be getting the death penalty. He then says, I'm guilty. Do they like immediately, how does that work in the legal process? Do they like, oh my gosh, 5-alarm fire. He's just said he's guilty. Call the judge. We got to do a hearing immediately. How does that all work?
No, you have to they schedule a hearing for the plea.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was
the next day because it was supposed to be that change of venue. And then
that was the informal though. We had an actual formal plea thing, and then we had this
where he got sentenced. Yeah.
So it takes a little bit of time to do the legal process, make sure all the I's are dotted, T's are crossed, that kind of thing. But from start to finish, especially for a capital murder case, her case moved very, very fast. I mean,
14 months.
Yeah.
14 months we were done with him.
Right. But there wasn't 14 months you were in court.
We were in court every few weeks because there would be evidentiary hearings. So, I mean, the police would have like the DNA. Okay. Now the defense has the opportunity in these evidentiary hearings to come in and challenge the evidence and say, well, they didn't do this procedure right, or this isn't right, or they would come in and challenge the video evidence and say, well, this video isn't right. This isn't really showing what it says it, I mean, we had tons and tons and tons of these evidentiary hearings that just put you.
It's exhausting.
I mean, your stomach.
I would be exhausted after the first.
For me, it was a huge, huge deal because I've spent my whole life in law enforcement, and I trust the system. I believe in the system, in the judicial system. It works. And, he'd come in and they'd come in and they'd challenge everything. And I'm sitting there thinking, what happens if this judge says, okay, I agree with you, and what am I going to do then? Where's my recourse? Luckily, none of that happened.
And you had the video of her walking out of the Target. You played that.
Yes.
We had 10 hearings, if I remember correctly, on whether or not the defense had that clip. 10.
Why?
Because they kept saying they didn't have it, even though the prosecutor could show.
Every TV station across the world had it. How did you not have it?
And the prosecutor had shown in their evidence log where they had given it to them, and the evidence person came in and testified. They picked it up. Well, then they would say, well, but you gave us so much evidence. How can we get just that little snippet? That's what we're looking for.
Yeah.
And then it came, what ended up happening is Target came in town to testify, and the Target person, they took their hard drive. They ended up taking the hard drive out of their computer and handing it to the defense attorney in front of the judge so the prosecutor could say, there, Your Honor, now you see they have this.
Was that just a stall tactic?
I think part of it was that. Part of it was a multiplexing video system. And so if you don't have the right equipment to play that, it's not going to play back correctly.
Yeah.
And I think at first that the defense team may not have known, those types of things. I mean, a lot of it was
It was game playing.
Pardon my French. Yeah, it was BS stuff that defense attorneys
It's
do.
a podcast. This isn't the FCC rules here, Greg. You just say what's on your mind, pal.
Well, and one of the things we ended up telling friends and family, and I tell other family members going through this, is as painful as it is, and as much as it pisses you off and the bullshit you think it is, you want those defense attorneys to do everything possible to get that person off. Because then when they're convicted, there are less chances of appeal.
That's right.
You just have to face it that.
Well, let's face it, that they're doing their job too.
Absolutely.
Right.
That's the hell of being I mean, I guess that's what you signed up for as a defense lawyer, but in this particular case, like,
Well, one
it's
of the
like
defense attorneys apologized to me.
I was going to ask that, because that's like signing a deal with the devil.
His daughter had mutual friends with Kelsey, and he came up to me in the parking lot, not knowing that, and he said he would rue the day he agreed to take the case. And my thing was, please, I didn't have any problems with him, but there were some of the experts that all kept coming up and apologizing to me. And I said, please tell them to just shut up and stop telling me how sorry they are.
Yeah.
Don't tell me you're sorry when you're trying to save his ass.
Yeah.
Like, come on.
Sure.
Just zip it.
Yeah. That would be really tough to hear. It's almost like contradicting, like, I don't know. I wanted to ask this question because I know that, and I want to get into Kelsey's. There's so much to talk about, and we're already an hour and 16 minutes into this. But I'm so curious because I have an 8-year-old daughter. I've referenced that before, and I know part of what you do with Kelsey's Army is to, teach people, women in particular, about their surroundings and
No, not just women.
Not okay. Well, sorry.
Nope, you're fine.
I'm speaking, I guess, because from a father who has a daughter,
right.
in saying that I would like her to be involved in an organization like this, because as a woman, I want her to be, and I try as a dad to talk to her about, being aware of your surroundings, but also the part of self-defense, right? Just the little things that you can do to defend yourself. Had you, as a father who worked in law enforcement and knew some of this stuff, had talked to Kelsey about any of this stuff? And if you hadn't, it's okay. I'm not judging you by any means, but I'm just wondering, was there any evidence that, because I think I remember reading or seeing where he had some wounds and cuts or abrasions or whatever you may call it, because she was fighting.
Yeah, she did fight back. And yes, I did teach her some stuff that I knew from law enforcement tactics and things at work, and she was pretty good at it. It's another one of those stories about Kelsey. I remember John's over at the house one time, and they're both laying on the couch together watching television, and Kelsey wants to change the channel, and John's got the remote, and he won't give it to her, and she's locking him up and putting him in these pressure holds. Taught her so that she can get the remote out of his hand, But I'd come up behind all the kids that I taught this stuff to, or I'd grab them or bear hug them from behind and what do you do? And, and she knew the right move to do to get out of that type of thing. In fact, I said this at the time, out of all 5 of my kids, she is the least likely one that I would have thought this would happen to.
But there were 2 things that occurred that probably you can't defend against. One was he had a gun.
I did not know that.
Yeah, he had a gun, and the gun had her DNA on the tip. So that means it was probably saliva in her mouth.
Yep.
The second is he had used her belt around her neck to control her. So if he's behind you, he's got a gun, and he's got a belt around your neck controlling you. And it was right here. And if you push, right in the middle of your neck, it just takes a few seconds for it to be so uncomfortable. And that was part of the reason they were able to charge with capital murder, because there was evidence that he would choke her out and then bring her back, choke her out and bring her back.
Yeah, I wanted to ask that question, and I was struggling with how to ask it.
Ask us anything.
I know, but I'm talking to the parents of an 18-year-old daughter who was raped and murdered. And I was, was this sick bastard?
Yeah.
did he kill her before he did the crap that he did to her? Or
No.
it sounds like he was so sick that he got off on the pain that she was going through.
I think that's it. But part of the reason, I don't want it to seem like we're cavalier or just okay with everything that happened to her. We have the thought process that if anyone can learn anything from her case, that's why we share it. So if a young lady or a young man is out there and someone's got a gun on you, that's the time you fight. You fight in the parking lot. You don't let them take you somewhere else. Because if you leave crime scene 1, crime scene 2 is probably where your body's going to be, like it was with Kelsey. So anything we can do to try to prevent or educate people, like talking to law enforcement, talking to parents on here's what you can do in a case, anything like that. That's why we're here.
Yeah.
And I mean, the Missy mentioned that he had a gun. It was an airsoft.
Oh, geez. But she wouldn't know any different.
She would not.
No. And when I was a Kansas City, Missouri cop, we had people that would take airsofts and, pull them like they're real weapons. And you can't tell. I mean, the airsofts are made to look like a real weapon. They don't have the little, red tips on them and those types of things. So,
yeah.
There is video. Because after naturally, I mean, look, she became, how do I say it the right way? I mean, naturally, Kansas City is a pretty, it's not Chicago. It's not New York. It's not LA. I mean, Kansas City is the smallest big city in the world.
There were only 2 murders in Johnson County that year. She was one.
This made national news.
International.
Internet. Like, it was a huge deal. And I remember it wasn't just news like this. This like hit home. This was like impactful. I remember I'm not even married. I don't have kids at the time. I'm a single guy just working the radio station and hearing the story. And it's emotionally affected. It affected everybody. It affected everybody to a point to where, I'm not that guy who's going to Google every single murder news story that's out there, but now I'm hearing about this girl and everything that's about her and her family, and I'm fascinated. I'm interested, so I'm reading up on it. I'm Googling about it. I'm trying to get more information about this, and naturally, I got to become friends with you guys, and I'm helping you with the campaign video. And so I'm trying to inform myself on what's this video that I'm going to put together. So I'm getting more information that I didn't know during the time. And one of the things that I came across was not only was there video of her walking out of the Target and video of him shortly after walking out of the Target, but from a quartering distance, there's actually, now you can't identify the person, but you can see that there is somebody running up and pushing what it looked like, pushing her in to the car.
Right.
Is that how it happened? Like, he basically, the door came open, she got blindsided from behind and got pushed in the car. He follows her in, shuts the door, does something in order to keep her still so that he can start the car, back it up, and drive out of there.
We don't know if it's that or if he had the gun and made her drive. I mean, we don't know. It could have been either.
And that never came out. He never, of all the crap, and there's some sick shit that came out. Like, that never came out. I would think that the police would want to kind of know that information for future, like.
That's one of those we can ask Detective Miller.
Yeah, my recollection of talking to the detectives, it did not come out when he had to give his accounting of what he had done in court, but he did. I remember the lead detective, Bob, who's a real good friend of ours, saying that they think he was in the seat behind her when they left the parking lot.
Right.
And that he then obviously drove the car back, which is how his fingerprint got on that seatbelt when he put the seatbelt on himself.
I also remember in that video seeing people walking out of the Target.
Yep.
Yeah, there were people walking in, people walking out, people driving by.
And nobody saw anything?
No, they canvassed, they put that video out and they asked if you were in the parking lot at this time, please contact the police. And nobody that they contacted saw anything, which tells me that, I mean, again, this is after the fact. We find out that he's tried this before at the River City Market.
And there were other cases.
And there were probably, he tried something over at Westridge Middle School, which is just across the street from the mall.
The middle school?
Yeah.
Some lady in the evening was walking on the track.
I was thinking like a child.
You know, so,
well, no, Ronnie, you say that. He thought she was 12. That's what he said to the police. I saw her. She had nice legs.
Yeah, that's what he said.
She was
but
12.
that was, we all know that's total BS because her car pulls in the parking lot and he's following her in his truck. So he knows she's not 12. She's driving a car. I mean, that's just he's just trying to get out of.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Oh my. Anyway. Okay. So what's crazy is that nobody saw in the Target parking lot with again, watching that video and the amount of activities coming out.
And that's just it. I mean, from the time that you see him appear in the video.
The flash.
Yeah.
Until her car backs out of the parking space is 16 seconds.
That's all it took.
So, he practiced. He knew what he was doing.
It wasn't his first rodeo.
Nope.
Okay. So, let me ask this before we move on. This is another one of those tough questions because this was when I was doing, for lack of better words, research. That's when I came across things that were brought up in the hearing, which is the really sick stuff that I can't even fathom how a parent could hear what he did. I mean, just to know that a rape and a murder is just kind of a broad paintbrush stroke of what really happened because the details are gruesome. I want to know, how are you psychologically capable of sitting in that room to hear all of that stuff and not lose your shit?
Because he doesn't matter. She mattered. It was all about.
But you can say that now, and at the time,
even
then you were that strong
then.
because I would want,
Absolutely.
like you see sometimes on some of this stupid shit that's on YouTube or on social media where they're talking about all this stuff and a family member's diving over a desk or something and trying
and it was those types of things, those videos that had been on TV in the past on shows and stuff, families reacting that way, where we sat down and said, from this point on, he gets nothing else from us.
Yep.
He got Kelsey. That's it. He gets nothing else. And our job from this point on is to honor Kelsey and let people know her story. That's the important thing. And that was literally a conversation.
Do you think that was your background in law enforcement that helped you have that?
That was me.
That was you saying that. Kudos to you. Kudos to you. Yeah. Because I'll tell you this. I've had this conversation with my dad. Not necessarily about your guys' story, but just in general. Mm-hmm. I'm a Second Amendment guy. I love to hunt. Naturally, I have guns. And I try to think, what am I going to do? How am I going to react if somebody tries to invade? Now, again, this is two different scenarios, but how am I going to react if somebody tries to invade my home or invade my daughter? Will I have the balls to use a gun on that person, and then I try to bring in the faith side of it, like what?
If he had been coming into our home,
that's a different story. I get it. Yeah. I understand that, but I'm just saying that even if I was in your shoes and if it was afterwards, I know me, and I'm not saying it's right, but I know me, and I'd want to kill the bastard.
Well,
and I'm not saying it's right.
No. You want to do that. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. And I will tell you that is not far beyond where we were at. Mm-hmm. But if I hated him, if I did that, he took more from my life. He took more energy and angst and created more negativity in our life. And we had 4 more kids. Our kids, the youngest 2 were 10 and 12. This may be like shocking to some people. A couple of weeks after Kelsey was killed, Cody, who was 12 at the time, wanted to go to the mall with her friends. Mm-hmm. We let her go with her friends without us. And people are like, how can you do that? Because we couldn't stop their life. If we didn't let her go to the mall, then Kelsey's killer took more from our lives than just Kelsey. And I wasn't giving him that.
I love you. I love you both. I mean, I knew I loved you, but that helps me. You
glad.
telling that story helps me. Let me also ask this. I know you talked about in that video that I played, you read some scripture there at the end. Are you guys, I know you are, but I'm going to ask it for those who don't know or in the podcast. Are you faith-based? Is your faith important to you? You really leaned on your faith during that? What part did faith play in overcoming? I don't know if overcoming is the right word, because you don't know if you truly overcome it, but help give you the strength to
move forward.
Yes.
One step in front of the other.
Yes.
You never move on
Right.
because she's not here. So you just move forward.
Right.
Yeah, faith was a huge part of it for me. I don't know when I had this epiphany, if you'll call, I guess, for lack of a better word. But while I'm trying to deal with it all and put everything into perspective, I'm thinking that the thought process that I run through is who understands this, who can walk me through this. And the thought I had was, hey, God had a son murdered. He gets this.
So for me, it
Duh.
was
Like I'm just sitting here going, I should know this.
right. But for me, it created a little bit of anger because growing up in a home without a father, this guy's supposed to love me, being our heavenly father.
Right.
And if he understands what it's like to lose a child to murder, why would he let me go through that?
Yeah.
So you're
really being challenged in your faith.
Yeah, and I am a person of faith, very much so, and I know where my child is. But there was that struggle,
naturally.
and I'm just being real,
Yeah, I want you to.
There was one time I was driving. I know exactly where I was. I was at I-29 and going up to Berry Road, area 635, where it hits.
Sure.
I-29. And God laid on my heart, you need to pray for Kelsey's killer. And
Just randomly.
oh yeah, I'm driving my Ford Expedition, and I'm like, it was just there, and I was like, God, excuse me if I upset anyone. I said,
No, I want you to be real.
yeah, I was. I said, I don't know what the fuck you want me to pray for him for, but I just did. I'm done. That was it.
Yeah. Have you prayed for him since?
No.
No.
It hasn't been laid on my heart. It was that time.
Yeah.
I prayed for his child because his child is now known as the child of a murderer.
Yeah.
And that child's going to grow up with some hell. I mean,
has grown up.
Yeah, he's 21, 22.
How old was he when that happened?
6.
6, and that was 15 years ago.
Yeah.
Holy smokes. Man, where's the time gone? Greg, how angry were you? Like, as a dad, right? And you're a police officer, and you're the strong one, and you're, did you have that feeling of initially, like, you want to go and get this guy?
Or sure. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's just a whole range of emotions.
Oh, sure.
That you run through from anger to.
The reason I'm asking, and I don't mean to interrupt, I'm sorry, but it sounded, the way you presented it was like you had this family meeting and you're like, we're not giving anything more to him. We're not going to give more to him. And it was like the decision was made. And
no. It's an ongoing process.
I'm sure it's an ongoing process, but I was like, there had to have been. It's only natural that once you've identified this person and you know what the hell he did to her, like, you're ready to take that guy out.
Oh, sure. I mean,
so where was the moment where you were able to find clarity and perspective and say, okay, we all need to sit down and have a serious come to Jesus talk?
Probably for me, I mean, when we're in there for the hearings, all these different hearings that we went to every single hearing.
Yeah.
Somebody, in our mind, we were there for Kelsey. We were speaking for her since she couldn't speak anymore. I wasn't any farther away from him than you and I are right now.
Oh my God, I can't imagine.
You bring things. I brought things that were hers that I could hold on to keep me grounded while I'm in that courtroom. You had to.
but
keep
the
the
thought
focus.
that I had was just like you were talking about, those videos of the dad going
Yeah.
over the rail and stuff
Yeah.
like that. What does that accomplish
Nothing.
other than make a headline? And
It's
and
counterproductive.
and it's embarrassing.
Yeah.
I mean, in the aftermath, it's embarrassing that some. I mean, not that I don't understand why. Yeah, I wanted
Sure.
to jump over the rail.
I think we had that conversation with everyone. It was about the third time, the third hearing, because one of Stevie's friends came with us, and
Who's Stevie?
Our oldest daughter.
Oldest
Stevie,
daughter. Okay, yeah.
One of her friends came with us, and God bless them, it was our fault because we did not let them know the zoo this was going to be.
Media was in our face constantly those first few.
And
weeks.
she yelled at him, "Get that fucking mic out of my face!" And I was like, "Whoa, no, we're not gonna conduct ourselves this way, because if we do, that's gonna be the story." So after that, we sat everyone down, and that's when we did it. Was after that hearing to say, "Okay, guys, this is gonna be tough. It's gonna be tough, and if you can't go, that's okay." We're okay with that. But when you go, here's how you have to conduct yourself, or you become the story, and you don't want to be the story.
It takes away from Kelsey. We want people to know who Kelsey is. We want people to know what she was like. If we or anybody in the group does something like that, you've just pulled attention away from the important thing.
Why we're there.
We're there.
It's fascinating. And it gives me perspective as a, and I hope to God, Lord, if you're listening, and I know you are, I hope I never, ever, ever have to go through anything remotely close to what you guys went through. But I often think about it. I think about when I'm being challenged in my faith, the Lord, when does the Lord want us to turn a cheek, and when does he want us to go to war for him? And I actually put a post up there on Facebook about that recently.
Ronnie, I will say this. This is what I told Senator Olson, who did Kelsey's law. God knew that law needed to change.
Mm-hmm.
He did. He knew Kelsey was already gone. He knew by changing that law that lives would be saved. And he knew her parents had the mouths to get it done.
Mm-hmm.
So that's part of the reason I think she was out there for 4 days. God turned that evil into something good.
I agree.
I mean, her story has, you were talking about it earlier. People are captivated by it, fascinated by it for whatever reason. I mean, Missy and I are completely humbled by the fact that so many people care about Kelsey. But there have been 6 documentaries done on her. They just did another one. Another one aired last month in May. And when they contact us and say, "Hey, we're interested in doing a story on Kelsey," I remember this one. I talked to the producer and I was like, "There've been several. I mean, what else is left to tell in the story?" And she said, "Well, this one we've got a little bit of a different angle." And she goes, "I'll be quite frank with you. People are interested in her."
Yeah.
And in just the way you look at your daughter, she's just our kid. Like, she's just our kid.
Let me ask this. Gosh dang, we've got so much more to cover, and it's been an hour and 37 minutes. Oh man, we could be here all night. I told you it might be a late night. We joked about that.
And part 2 next week.
We can just stay here and you can make it.
That's right. That couch right there actually folds out into a bed. It's got a foam mattress in it. I've slept on it, and believe it or not, it's the best pull-out bed or couch that I've ever. Anyway, I digress. So when naturally we have a relationship, and so I'm honored and grateful that you would want to visit with me about something that is so difficult. But I'm curious, like, when these people, these producers, like, they're trying to make a buck, right? This is content that they are making. They're going to sell it. They're going to make money on. They're making money on the death of your child, the murder, the rape, the horrific story, and everything that happens on it. And I'm not here to make a dime on this. I'm not even I think in the 9 episodes that I've made $5 through Anchor. That is a true story. I'm not going to make any money on this.
That's more than we've made off of any of the episodes.
Okay, so there you go. That's where I'm going with this. Like, why do it's like this fine line. You want to You want to tell like Kelsey's story because it could help people. You want to tell Kelsey's story because you want to keep Kelsey's name alive. I mean, there's a variety of different reasons why you would agree to now 6 documentaries, not to mention the other endless amount of TV interviews, podcasts, radio interviews, newspaper stories, magazine articles, you name it. You've done them all. Do you get to the point where you're like, no, not feeling it? Where do you see where I'm going with this? Like,
yeah, it really boils down to what Missy said earlier. I mean, if people can learn anything from her story, if it helps somebody that finds themselves in a situation, or it increases their situational awareness when they're out there by hearing about Kelsey, or if just her life and the things that she did and the type of person she was inspires somebody, then that's important.
The other thing is, by keeping her name out there, I still have 20 states to go to get the Kelsey Smith Act. So if one of those legislators see her story and they say, we don't have this here, okay, we're there.
That's a really good answer.
And it's so far reaching. I mean, we know when one of these documentaries is aired
in Italy,
overseas, because all of a sudden I'm getting emails and Facebook messages from Great Britain and from France and from Spain, and we're
Italy.
Just saw
wow
the special on your daughter, and I'm like, and they give me a name, and it's like, that's not what they called it over here, so I don't know which one you watched.
Sure.
But after she was murdered, and the national news had started to pick up on it. Fox News and CBS and all the big stations were here. All of a sudden, I'm getting emails at work from police officers around the world that had heard. I mean, I got emails from officers over in Israel and all the Middle East and Europe, and all of a sudden, that's how fast it traveled. We had people that we knew that were missionaries, and Kelsey's pictures on the front page of the newspaper over there.
Yeah, we were sent a newspaper from Iraq, I think, and there she is in all of her glory in what we call the picture. And we were laughing because that was the other thing we did. You have to find the humor in things. We were laughing because there was Kelsey on the front page of a newspaper in Iraq, and I went, she doesn't even have a burqa on. So there's this beautiful American girl, and she's on the front page of a newspaper in Iraq.
Wow.
Yeah. And one of the things we did, and it's divine intervention, I know it is, the way he spoke to us at the time was when What Would Jesus Do was big. And we sat down and said, what would Kelsey do if this was one of us? And she would make it better for others. And that's all we try to do. Our kids were scouts. You leave it better than you found it. And that's all we're trying to do, is make things better than what we found them.
Man, the character of you two is inspiring.
We're just parents.
I get it. I'm a parent too, but I'm telling you, like, it's an inspiration to me. I'm not going to lie. Like, I've actually, because I know I have a relationship with you, I've thought, and is it sick that I think about these things, or is it because I'm trying to prepare myself to respond to a situation if it were to come up? Because let's face it, if this could happen to you guys and your daughter, it could happen to me too.
It could.
It could. And let's just hope that it doesn't. But I wonder, like, I think to myself, man, if that happened to me, the first people I would call Greg and Missy Smith, because they're the only two people that are in my life. Oh, shit. I was trying not to do that. But no, the two people in my life that I would truly understand what I would be going through. I'm crying and nothing's even happened to my daughter. What the hell's wrong with me? But, but like.
No, you know what?
And we've met with several
I can
families,
imagine. I bet you
that
have
been in similar situations.
Is that hard for you? Or is it because, the psychology side of this? You guys know that I had a demon, whatever. I had some issues last 2 years, which I was internalizing a lot of depression and anxiety. Is this medicine for you? When you can talk about it, is it hard for you? Like when there's times when I'm asking these questions, or another family has lost a loved one to murder and the horrific things that happened during that murder, and they're coming to you, does it make you revisit all the stuff that happened to your daughter to where it's painful, or is it sometimes painful, sometimes medicine? How does that?
It's all.
It's all of it.
It's all, yeah. There are some times where you just think, I can't do it. I just can't do it today. But then there are other times where we had a family come sit with us, the Sanderholm family. Their daughter Jody was killed in almost the same exact way from Ark City, Kansas. And about 6 months after Kelsey was killed, they came and sat in our living room. And just to have someone that got it. It's like when you were talking with your friend about PTSD and you didn't have to explain it. They just got it.
Yeah.
That's what it's like.
Yeah.
So to be able to be that person that gets it and to be there for another parent, there were people there for us. And we were just raised to be giving people.
You are.
Yeah. My mom was a single parent of 4 daughters. And I remember one time we're driving in a car somewhere and there's a lady walking without shoes. And my mom pulls over and
Give
gives
her shoes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's just
the way you are. That's the way you're built.
Yeah.
That's inspiring. Okay. We got to get into Kelsey's Army. We got to get into Kelsey Smith Foundation. We got to get into Greg's PTSD. I was going to ask another question. The question I was going to ask again is, so did you have to, will be the last question and then we're moving on. Do you have to, you talked about not having the capacity, like saying some days I can't do it, not feeling it today. So like, do you have to ramp yourself up, like prepare yourself to know that you're coming to do this podcast, or you're getting ready to go on Nancy Grace, or, go do a show? Like do you have to mentally prepare yourself for what it is that you're about to do? Or has time been able to heal a little bit to where it becomes a little bit more, I don't know if natural is the right word, but it's what I'm going to use.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes to all of it.
With time is a little bit.
Sometimes we're preparing ourselves if we've got a big presentation coming. Sometimes when you're going to talk to a parent, you do the breathing. I have a sign in my office that says just breathe. And you have to do that. It's all of the above.
I mean, for me tonight coming here, and like I said, tomorrow I'm presenting at the National Sheriff's Association. I always get amped before I do one of those anyway. And then we're coming here to do this. So I'm like double amped.
Sure. Because of the close proximity of which it's all happening.
Yeah. But when I get up to do, it's a case study on Kelsey's case. I walk people through the evidence. I walk people through what happened. I talk about the DNA and the video and the phone and, all of it. And it's law enforcement, so I'm dealing with folks that have to deal with these types of crimes anyway. So on one level, it's training for law enforcement. On another level, this is my kid.
Yeah.
And I need to talk about her.
Yeah.
She's not here anymore, but she's important.
Yep. And so that's medicine for
mattered.
you. That's medicine for you.
So that's part of it. And then there's the, celebrate her life part of it. And there's, here are things that you need to know when you've dealt with a case of this magnitude as an investigator. Do you have a debriefs in place? Because the mental trauma from this is real, whether you want to admit it or not.
Sure.
And as a cop now of over 25 years, I've seen a lot of shit.
Yeah.
Most of those involved in her case had a daughter around her age. So that was something that was very, I don't know if it's helpful or.
It was a strange coincidence that most of the people that had the major investigation part of her case all had daughters about Kelsey's age at the time.
including the person, the funeral director. I mean, she told us a story after she had prepared Kelsey, because he kept telling me, being a police officer, we are not going to see her. We are not going to see her. And I was like, oh no, yes, we are. Like, and so we talked to the funeral director, because she'd been out there 4 days. So, you know, things happen. And I said to Gina, you get her ready, because I'm seeing her. And Gina
was that hard for you that she was so hell bent on that?
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
yes.
Was that
that was one of those.
Because
Yeah,
I know, I mean,
you know what you're about to see.
I've seen other people, and I've seen, and that
you don't want to
still
see her
up here.
Yeah.
And I don't want to remember Kelsey like that.
But the victim's advocate said to him, mothers have to. Mothers do, fathers don't.
Did you see her?
Yes.
Greg?
I mean, I saw Kelsey once she was in the coffin, yes.
Yes.
You know, and she'd been prepared. I didn't see her prior to any
That's
of
what I
that.
meant.
I haven't looked at any autopsy photos.
But you were talking about, were you talking about seeing her after she was done at
Yes.
okay. And she was.
But even then, so when we didn't know if we were going to go to trial, I said, you will show me every picture.
Oh,
and he
shit.
said, you will not. And I said, oh, yes, I will.
So you saw the pictures.
I did not.
Oh.
We didn't have to, because he pled guilty.
Okay.
Which
Okay.
was another reason, because her case was heard before a grand jury. That's another whole story.
Yeah.
That all of the evidence in her case is private. It keeps it private. So that was a little bit of dignity we could give her, since it was presented to the grand jury. It has to stay secret.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. All right. Let's move on.
Moving on.
We're moving on. Rascal Flatts. I'm moving on. Can't believe I just did that. I don't know. I try to keep this at 90 minutes. We're way past that, but I know you guys got things to do. I want to talk about Kelsey's Army, but I also want to talk about the cell phone, the Kelsey Smith Act. And I feel like that the Kelsey Smith Act is more important to talk about. Not that it's, I shouldn't say more important to talk about, but you brought up how the reason you agreed to do these documentaries and these interviews and all the things is because you got 27 more states out there. 20 more states that are out there that have not implemented the Kelsey Smith Act. So let's talk about that. And if you guys still want to stick around for a few more minutes and talk about Kelsey's Army and the Kelsey Smith Foundation, I personally like to know more about that because I have a daughter. So you decided that once you'd learned the information about the pinging of the cell phone, you could have found Kelsey's body within 30, 45 minutes.
45 minutes is how long it took to find her, yeah.
Yeah, but you weren't able to find the body for 4 days because the cell phone company would not release it. And I think that at the time, the mentality was, well, this is private information, right? And so we're infringing, if I can say it right, infringing upon somebody's privacy if we're giving out this information. And if you start it there, then it could be a snowball effect. And then I'm assuming that's why the policy and the protocol was what it was at the time.
That's part of it. The other part was when we're calling on a Saturday night late, and the person on the other end of the phone isn't understanding, you better bump this up to the next level. Mm-hmm. We didn't find that out for several years, that they had made mistakes.
Oh, the cell phone company made mistakes?
Yes. When we were calling
Are you comfortable saying who that was?
Oh, it's Verizon. I don't care. I'll say it.
No, I'm just...
Yeah, they were a provider then, and
guessing not anymore.
The big companies have an emergency call center. And when something like this happens, what's supposed to happen is if somebody calls in to the customer service line, which is where we were calling, their training should be, I need to kick this to the emergency center.
Yeah.
And they didn't.
That never happened.
And I'm sure you called multiple times.
Yes.
Yeah, we were.
And you got the same response every single time.
No, to be quite honest, a couple of times the response I got was, well, we can kick up your plan to the next level if you want. Because remember, at that time, you're limited in the number of minutes you have. And so.
Oh my God, they're trying to sell you a better package.
Yep.
Like, Ronnie, we called them additional assaults that we so went through with everything that was going on top of dealing with our kid being gone and this, you're calling Verizon and Verizon is saying, I can't ping the phone, which John is saying, but Sprint says they can ping the phone. Later, we learned from the representative. So about a month
The
after
representative for Verizon?
Verizon,
Okay.
right. A month after Kelsey went missing in July of 2007, the district attorney arranged a meeting with Verizon officials and Greg and I. And they weren't really wanting to. And the district attorney said, I think it would be in your best interest to meet with this family. So in comes Mark Crumpton, the president of the Verizon area, Missouri, Kansas
City area.
And then the next person introduces themselves as like government affairs. And I looked at him and said, you're a lawyer. Yes, Mrs. Smith, I'm a lawyer. Then the next person introduces himself as counselor or something. And I said, you're a lawyer. Yes, Mrs. Smith, I'm a lawyer.
So there were just a bunch of lawyers there.
3 lawyers. The lady says, whatever her name was, and then she didn't even tell me her title. She said, Mrs. Smith, I'm a lawyer. And I said, I got the president and 3 lawyers. If you brought them, I looked at Mr. Crumpton, because you think we're here to see your asses, that's not what this is about. You figure out what was broke that night, because you failed Kelsey and you failed us as a family. And we need to figure out what happened.
What was the response you got?
The response I got from the female lawyer was, well, Mrs. Smith, you kept asking us for pings. That isn't a terminology we use. And I looked at her.
Jeez, what the hell else does it mean?
Oh, well, I looked at her and I said, I called you and I told you my child was missing. Don't you make a family try to figure out what is the fucking magic word to get you off their ass to help them find their kid.
Damn right.
You knew what I meant.
Yeah.
You absolutely. My 10-year-old son knows what a ping is.
Yeah.
We later learned Verizon really could not ping a phone. They could not.
They didn't have the ability.
They did
Right.
not have the ability.
A ping is to send an actual signal out and make contact with the phone.
Okay. So, but they did do that 4 days later.
No.
They can't.
They never did.
They didn't have the capability to actively ping a phone.
So how through the cell phone did they locate the body
That
4 days
was-
later?
That was done through what's called CSLI. That's cell site location information. Every cell phone logs towers that it hits, and those become business records.
Okay,
and you can
so-
go back and look at the historical data and figure out which towers it made contact
That's what
with.
they did.
And
So
that's what they did.
At any one time, your phone can be talking to 3 towers, and they triangulate that to
Yep.
see where it was. And then the engineer on that 4th day went out and narrowed down the pie for them and said, here's where you need to look. And that's when she was found in 45 minutes.
And again, you have to remember, this is 2007, so we're not talking GPS-capable phones or any of that. We didn't have Bluetooth back then.
Yeah.
so
so
the
the-
Verizon story gets better.
So I just want to clarify something.
ahead.
In the beginning, when I played the clip in no, that wasn't Fox 4. That was KCTV5, I believe. That was talking to the person who was on site doing the interview, and and they were asking about the cell phone tower and having the tower pinged. In fact, that's inaccurate. This cell phone was not pinged because Verizon, although maybe Sprint did at the time, have the capability.
It was located.
Verizon didn't. They just used a different tactic to locate the general vicinity, not the pinpoint location, but the general vicinity of where the body could be.
Right.
Correct.
Which I mean, with CSLI, you can get pretty close. GPS is obviously
pinpoint,
light years ahead of that.
Yeah.
But that's one of the things when I present Kelsey's case at these conferences is, to let officers know the terminology that you need to use when you're trying to get this, and industry wide, yes, a ping is a thing to actually send that pulse to the phone, but the more technically correct term is locate. Locate a phone, locate a wireless device. And so that's part of our training.
I mean, let's just break out the crayons here, Verizon.
Thank you.
Jeez, are you kidding me? Like, I'm sorry, my terminology was too advanced for you. I used ping. I should have said locate.
That's why I said to the lawyer.
I mean, did it not seem as though, I mean, it sounds like that lawyer, that female lawyer, it was almost patronizing.
No, it was CYA. They were covering their asses.
No, absolutely, 100%.
Because-
But the fact that she's even talking to you like this after what you've just gone through and what you were striving to do, I mean, it's almost, not almost, it is. It's patronizing the way that she was even talking to you.
Well, they were covering their butts even more because the president, Mark Crumpton, said to me, Mrs. Smith, if you have any issues whatsoever, you call me. I'm going to deal with them. We're going to take care of everything. He said, is there anything else I can do? And I said, well, yeah, everybody that was, then I'm thinking of the cell phone plans. Anyone that helped to find her, they need their bill wiped. Like, you guys could cover that. And he said, if you have any issues whatsoever, you contact me. And I said, I'm going to contact you, and I'm going to come back, and you're going to tell me what you found broken that night, because I want to know. So when I called a few weeks later, Mr. Crumpton is no longer with the company.
Ooh.
Yep. So his assistant, Nancy Bates, got the unpleasant job of telling me, Mrs. Smith, Mr. Crumpton is no longer with the company. And I explained to her why I was calling, and that I told him I was going to call to see what was broken that night. She called me back to say, Mrs. Smith, the lawyer said to tell you they found our protocols to be adequate. My response to that was, you tell those lawyers they have not heard the last of this mom.
Okay, good.
And that's why we have the Kelsey Smith Act. To be honest, and what the Kelsey Smith Act does, just so people know.
We need to broad overstroke. What is the Kelsey? I know what it is, but for the people listening, what is the Kelsey Smith Act?
So the Kelsey Smith Act is in a situation like Kelsey's, where someone is missing or their life is in fear of bodily harm or death. The location only of a phone is given to law enforcement, not text messages. No call information, no pictures, no content, none of that. Just where is the device? That's it.
And it's only in those what law enforcement term exigent circumstance, where somebody's life is in danger.
That's it.
Or serious bodily injury. That's
okay. So how do you classify that? How do you define that? Like, you didn't know that she was in danger. You just knew she was gone. And I mean, I'm not saying.
Right.
Well, but they could, through having listened to our because we made a police report, and they listened to our voicemail. It's not voicemail, answering machine at the time.
Okay.
Where she said, hey, I'm running late, sort of. So they could see from that she's not someone that would just disappear.
Yeah. I mean, through investigation by a law enforcement agency, that's how exigent circumstances are defined.
But isn't a lot of that discrepancy? I mean, that's what I'm trying to understand. How do you define it to where you?
Well, here's what I tell people when I'm testifying. So you and I may not know what an exigent circumstance is, but we spend a lot of time, money, and resources training our law enforcement officers on what a life-threatening situation is.
Okay.
They know what that is.
Okay.
They know the rules and the protocols in place to know what an exigent circumstance is.
And if you don't have a Kelsey Smith Act, there's general federal law that guides the release of that type of information. The problem with that oversight law that they have is the person that makes the decision if it's an exigent circumstance is the cell phone provider, not law enforcement. Doesn't it make a heck of a lot more sense to have somebody that's trained to handle emergency situations, like a law enforcement officer, make that determination, rather than a person that says, well, I can up your call plan?
Oh, jeez, I know. What in the world?
And it works. You know, we were recently in Utah, and I got to speak, because usually I just let him speak. He's teacher / law enforcement, so I let him do it.
I'm just going to say, you're a great speaker. You can hold your own, girl. You can hold your own. Missy Smith could do a radio show all by herself.
So I spoke in Utah, and I explained, how the law came about, like I just did with you. And I then asked, okay, how many of you in here, because it was law enforcement and social workers and stuff, have ever used a cell phone since 2007 to find someone in an emergency situation? Several hands went up. And I said, I'm going to sound a little arrogant right now, because Utah has the law. you're welcome. You are welcome. Because it's because of our child and the work we do, they have that law. And we saw a baby's face who probably wouldn't be alive without that law. You know, a baby like your baby who newborn, the mom was an addict or something, and they just had fear for this baby that it wasn't going to be alive.
She wasn't coming in for her appointments. She wasn't.
Right.
Social services was involved. She wasn't doing her check-ins and things like that. So they're concerned for the baby's life because.
And then the police officer said, "Let's locate the mother's phone." They found the baby, and you go from this obviously malnourished baby to a baby with fat cheeks and very healthy.
Yeah.
And that baby is alive because our baby isn't. For real.
Yep.
And then another person talked to us about their friend that jumped off of a mountain because they wanted to commit suicide. And while they didn't locate the phone before she jumped, they located her in time to get her the help she needed, and she's alive.
She's still alive.
So we hear stories of people being alive because of this law, and it works.
Yes.
They're welcome.
Thank you. If they didn't say thank you, I'll say thank you.
Oh, they did.
Okay, I hope so. So we got 20 out of the 50 in the in the states. We
have 30 of 50 done where it's passed. We only have 20 more where we need to get it passed.
That's what I mean. We got 20 left to go. 20 left to go of the 50.
Right.
So once we discovered that, or I'd say you discovered that, this is something that can save lives. This could have potentially saved our life. Kelsey's life.
It would not have saved her.
It would not. That's right. You did say that. I remember you saying that.
Gone. Right.
But you would have been able to identify, found the body sooner. But it could potentially save lives. You became an advocate. You were speaking on, I know you were traveling and speaking to different state governments. And then you saw the impact you were making, which was then what inspired you to run for the Kansas State Senate. And then there you won an election and you served one term. Is that correct?
I ran first for the Kansas House.
That's right.
And won a term there. And then I ran for the Kansas Senate and won a term there.
Okay. And then when I got involved is when you lost, which is probably my fault. I'm sorry. No. I wanted to ask this, and this is getting away a little bit. Did you ever, you lost the election, but that doesn't mean you can't ever get back. Did you ever?
No, I could run for office
just
again.
Never just felt a calling in another direction, doing other things?
And
or
that was a season.
Okay.
The things that I was able to accomplish while I was in the Kansas legislature, particularly when it came to victims' rights and dealing with crimes and the way that they're handled in court and those types of things, I was able to do a lot of things.
Sure. So you accomplished a lot of things that you were seeking out to do. My question then, as it pertains to the Kelsey Smith Act, was the act established prior to you becoming elected?
Yes.
It was.
Yes.
So it wasn't a situation, just because I want to make it clear for the listeners, it wasn't a situation like Greg's going to go in here. He's got this mission to get elected. And once he gets what he wants elected, hey, I'm out of here.
Oh, no.
2009 is when the Kelsey Smith Act passed in Kansas. That was the very first state. And I didn't get into office until 2011.
Okay.
But that was another one of those where we sat down and said, hey, look what we accomplished with just this.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine if one of us, and we had kids at home, so it was him.
Yeah.
If one of us ran for office, how much more could be accomplished?
Right. Do you feel like that experience being in Topeka and in the political scene gave you experience and maybe a little savvy to be able to then understand how state government works?
Oh, yes.
Not that you're ignorant to it all, being, and especially in law enforcement, but it had to because let's face it, there's some things that happen behind the curtains that we all don't know about.
Oh, absolutely.
And in order for you to accomplish what you want to accomplish, which is saving lives with the Kelsey Smith Act, you're going to have to understand how the wheel is greased.
Yep.
Right. And so that had to be incredibly, especially, I'm sure there were some things that were like, hey, this is really cool. And there were some things like, that's really dirty and grimy. is there anything about that?
Doors also.
That's my point. Yeah, it opened the doors and it gave.
Right.
It helped
so
you.
He was in session, and I did a lot for the Kelsey Smith Act. First, because it was my brainchild, but secondly, because he was in Topeka. So it opened a lot of doors for us to say, my husband is a state senator in Kansas. So people would listen a little more.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Because they're like, oh, you understand the process. You know how this works. And same thing when you go into the committee process and you have to testify in front of a committee. Knowing the nuances of how that works in committee and what makes an impact on a committee compared to what doesn't make an impact on a committee. I mean, I can tell you when I was in committee as a senator and somebody's coming in to testify either for or against the bill, if they stand up there and read their testimony, I'm like, I got your copy right here. Just tell me what's important. I don't, I mean, I wasn't telling them that, but
no,
I'm thinking we can all read.
I bet you wanted to tell them that.
Tell me the good stuff.
Yeah.
And that makes an impact, though. I mean, and these are the people that make the decisions on whether a bill passes or not, if it even gets out of committee. So it's that we had some insight then on how to make an impact on a committee and learned how to bullet point testimony so that you're not reading, and so you can just hit the high points and learn how to listen for the types of questions.
But it also taught us who to target, like who you speak to maybe get it to
the next person.
Yeah.
Right. And I will tell you, it's not a Republican or a Democrat issue. We probably have a few more Democrat sponsors because they are all about victims. Republicans are about law and order. Yeah. So it's also what it taught us was how do you approach a certain legislator to make your point also.
Yeah. So I guess what I was just trying to get at is that I'm sure there was a lot of eye-opening moments getting into Topeka, understanding how the system works. There was things that you learned that were going to help you advance your agenda.
Yes.
Right. Not knowing who to talk to, how to present yourself, and using your leverage to get to have the credibility, because unfortunately, just being the parents of a victim, wasn't enough.
Right.
You had to know how to grease the wheel, and being in politics helped you do that. So now you're not in politics though, and you got 20 more states to go. So how are you going to do it?
Well, it's the same way, reaching out and making contacts in those states that don't have it. One of the huge things that helps us make those contacts are the fact that I travel the United States and train law enforcement on cell phones and locating and all the laws that are out there, federal laws, federal case laws, and working with them so that they understand that, helping them design policies for their agencies so that they have the best procedures in place to be able to do these types of locates. That information gets out there, and then like officers will come up after I do a presentation or a seminar, and they're like, why don't I have this in my state? I said, I don't know. Why don't you have it in your state? Who do we need to talk to?
Yeah.
Who do you know in your state legislature that would be interested in doing something?
What's the pushback? I mean, you've talked to every state. There's no way you haven't talked or at least tried every state. What's the pushback?
The pushback is cell phone providers are doing a better job. We met with them in, I think, 2016, and they said, Mrs. Smith, we learned from her case. I said, that's great. We only had 16 states at the time because I said, can you guarantee me that every provider is releasing this information? And their response was no. And I said, I'll see you in the other 34. So they are doing a better job. And some in law enforcement, like Florida, they don't think they need it. We were just in Florida, and it was the legislator's office that I talked to. His staff said, we contacted our state agency. They don't think we need it. When we talked in Tampa to the analysts, they said, what do they mean we don't need it? They're not on the street seeing this. We do need this.
Do they say why they think they don't need it?
Because the providers releasing
that's the best answer you can get.
Yes.
Yeah. And here's what it boils down to. You're talking about those things you learned being in the legislature. State legislatures, when they want an opinion on something that's going on in law enforcement, they'll ask the state agency. So Florida Department of, what is it, FDLE?
FDLE.
That's who they ask. They don't ask Tampa
street
City
cop.
Police Department what's going on. They don't ask so-and-so County Sheriff's Department what's going on. They ask the state agency, which, while, yeah, they're law enforcement, they have a different function than the local guys do.
Mm-hmm.
And they may deal with one of those cases once a year, whereas the cities and counties may deal with those a couple times a month or more.
But the one thing the law does also for the cell phone providers, because they support the law, is it gives them immunity from being sued if they do release that information in an exigent circumstance. So it gives them some cover too, so that
that makes me. I was going to ask this earlier, so I'm sorry to get off topic a little bit, but I got to ask it since you brought it up. You never sued Verizon.
No.
Do you regret that?
No.
Not at all.
That was part of that was another one of those epiphanies we had.
I mean, after all the shit that they didn't like, it's not like they ever really made it right.
Here's what I said to him, Ronnie.
And why was he fired?
What I said to him was it either takes lawsuits or legislation to make big corporations act. If we'd have sued, do you think we'd have the Kelsey Smith Act in 30 states?
See, this is why I'm not in your shoes.
We didn't sue.
And the reason that the regional president lost his job is during that conversation with us in the DA's office, he said, I'm sorry things didn't go right that night, or we didn't handle it well that night.
So who's the guy who lets that guy in that position go? Is it the owner of Verizon, the CEO? Like who?
Oh, I don't know.
I don't know, but those 3 lawyers that were with him told somebody.
Yeah, they definitely ratted him out.
And that's why.
Definitely.
Because he literally told us, I am handling your account from now on.
He's the president
I'm the president of the company, and if you need to up your calling plan, you call me. And then a week later, he's not there anymore.
So then you did what you were going to say you didn't do. You call back a couple of weeks later. You didn't. You got somebody entirely different. Is that when all communication with Verizon stopped, or did you still continue to call back and try to?
We made contact with Verizon as we went to testify in different states because they were there, and I mean it's
nice tactic. I like that.
You know, because they have lobbyists that go and testify at state government just like they do at the federal level, and. You know, you meet the lobbyists and
they're just doing their job.
They're just doing their job. They had nothing to do with what happened that night with Kelsey. They weren't the ones on the other end of the phone. But it's interesting to hear.
I bet they're parents with kids, though.
Yeah. But you'd hear stories like, okay, look, the Smiths are going to come in and testify. It's going to sound really bad.
We look awful.
We look terrible, but they really are nice people. And what they're saying needs to be heard.
That's awesome.
And if you want to see something kind of funny, there's some YouTube video out there from when we testified in Minnesota of the gentleman there, and they'd ask him a question and I would say something, and I mean someone put it together, but it is hilarious.
All right, I got to look that up. I'm going to make a note of that. YouTube, Minnesota.
Kelsey Smith Act, yeah, or Missy Smith. It might come up better there.
Okay, so that was going to bring me to. So where are we at with Minnesota? Is it done there?
Minnesota has it.
It was one of the early states.
Nice. Okay, so
I can't tell you the 20 that don't have it, but if you ask me,
you said I could ask you anything. What are the 20 states that don't have the Kelsey Smith Act?
We didn't say we'd answer everything, though.
If you ask me a state, I can tell you if it has it.
Oh,
I can tell you because I'm pulling up the map.
Okay.
Yes. So go to kelsey'sarmy.org.
So you can post it, but you can't say it.
Well, no, I don't know.
Oh, you don't know. Oh, gotcha.
No.
If you go to kelsey'sarmy.org and click on
do you have it right there?
I can't get it to come up.
Okay, because the internet down here is terrible unless you're on the Wi-Fi, Greg.
So if you go to kelsey'sarmy.org, there's a
I already
tab
had
that
it in
says the Kelsey Smith Act.
Click on the Kelsey Smith Act tab.
Oh, wow, that's me. Look at me. I'm on the page. That's kind of cool.
Yeah, we shared, man.
All right, so where do I go?
Kelsey Smith Act.
Kelsey Smith Act.
Kelsey Smith Act.
Here we go.
There's the map.
There's the map. Okay, and so past is in blue, introduced is in dark. Of course, it's the East Coast.
Yeah, light blue's past, dark blue means that they've been working it this year.
Yellow.
Those that pass is Kelsey blue. That's what we call it. Carolina blue is Kelsey blue.
What is that? So what does that mean?
What?
What does it mean? The ones that so there's past and then there's Kelsey. Oh, the Kelsey's Blues pass. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I was looking at
sorry.
contact made, and I was thinking that was Kelsey Blue. So
No.
there's introduced, there's contact made, and then there's did not pass, which means it had been introduced, contact had been made, had been introduced, and they shut it down.
Or it may not have just
the
gotten
clock
worked.
ran out in that legislative session before it got through, or there could be a number of reasons.
Okay.
Right. If
so,
you ask me, Estate, I can tell you what happened there.
all right. So I'm going to talk about this.
Okay.
Let's see. So Wisconsin, I know that there are people who listen to this podcast who live in Wisconsin.
So contact Representative Jesse James. See, I told you if you ask me,
Oh,
I can.
gosh, she is good. Damn.
Representative Jesse James has reached out to law enforcement to see where they're at with it, and he is wanting to work it next session.
And that started because
Last year.
I did a presentation
Right.
for Wisconsin law enforcement, and they said,
Here's-
we're going to contact somebody, and then he contacted us.
Here's how you get to Wisconsinites. You tell them that
I mean,
Minnesota did it, was one of the first.
Jesse James, what a name.
Right? Right?
I think they were third,
Who?
fourth.
Minnesota.
Fourth, Minnesota. So
There's such this huge competition between Minnesota and Wisconsin. I was trying to play funny there.
also there, Ronnie, if you look, it's listed the states when it was signed by their governor. So you will
Oh
see.
yeah. Oh yeah.
Okay.
Hey, New Jersey, way to go, number 2.
Yeah.
That is incredible. All right. So, but all right.
So
And then
I-
the
I-
other thing that map does, if you any state on there, if you click on it, you will see what the legislation wording is for the state, how they wrote it up and passed it.
Okay.
And if there's a broken link, let us know because that map's me. I'm the one that does everything behind the scenes.
I'm the one that
Are
does
we
the
close?
links.
Are we getting close? You're probably thinking, are we getting close to ending this podcast? Are we getting close with any of these states that where it has been introduced?
No.
Not even remotely close.
Well, the states what is dark blue introduced?
Yeah.
Okay, so dark blue introduced that those were states that had a bill in session this year, and for whatever reason, a lot of those states only have a part-time session like we do in Kansas. A couple of them, like New York, go all year. So there's still a possibility that something could happen there, but probably will not.
Are we getting close with anybody that hasn't done it yet?
Not this year.
Not this year. Last year we had a really good year.
What I'm trying to do is do a screenshot of this map. I don't know if that's going to maybe be a dumb thing to do or not, because I want to try to figure out to put this in the video version of the podcast so that
I
people can
send
see.
you a
That's all right. I got a
snap of it.
I got a screenshot of it right now. All right, so we're looking at the ones that it has been introduced and not passed, which is Georgia,
South Carolina.
South Carolina, which I've got family and people who listen to this podcast who are in South Carolina. Who do they need to call?
So Brian Adams
Okay.
will introduce it. He's actually a former deputy on the department Greg worked at there. So we have mutual friends. And he is a new legislator and just kind of apologized to me. He will work at next session. And Joe, I can't remember Joe's last name. He's the representative out of Goose Creek. He doesn't return calls very well, so I will get you his name.
Okay.
North Carolina, we got it through the House with Representative Pat Hurley. Getting it through the Senate has been hard. We've gotten it through the House 3 times.
Wow. What's the hang up in the Senate?
Finding a senator that'll sponsor it. I found a guy there whose wife was from Iowa, and I sent him
All
this
the
long
stuff
message.
out there that a senator will sponsor and they won't sponsor this?
Yeah.
What the hell is wrong with people? Okay, Washington, D.C., District of Columbia.
We have to have a legislator, a senator, or a representative that will work a bill. They keep drafting it, but we can't get them off their butts to actually work it. You got to work it to get it through. It's been since 2009. The closest we came was Representative Kevin Yoder. He got it through. He's the one that arranged a meeting for us with the representatives, cell phone representatives. We got a vote on the House floor, and they did a maneuver because they didn't want a lot of amendments coming forth. So we had to get a supermajority vote, not just a majority. And
Okay.
it didn't get the supermajority vote.
Massachusetts.
It's Colleen Gary. She has proposed it a couple of times, but it's getting it worked.
Maryland.
There was a representative
Oh, wait a
there,
minute.
their delegate.
Never mind.
Yeah,
Sorry, go ahead.
there's a delegate there who totally understood the reason, because she had a friend that they couldn't get their cell phone location information to save their life. But I think her name is Williams. I've talked to her on the phone, but it just didn't get worked.
New York.
It's
New York is
Assemblywoman Seawright.
Yeah, and they got involved with it because of some incidents that have happened in New York, but there's so much crap going on in New York right now.
That was proposed before all of the governor crap and COVID. I mean, a lot of this, to be fair, COVID hit.
Yeah.
Senator Roberts was really working it in Kansas, and we thought it was going to pass, and then COVID, and everything's been all COVID since.
Yeah. Maine,
we had several hearings and a vote. It didn't pass there.
Didn't get out of committee. Right.
Right. No, they had a floor vote. They couldn't get it past the House in Maine. That's Representative Pickett, and that was Senator Searway.
Yep, Senator Searway.
I'm a little shocked about Ohio. Should I be?
Well, Ohio was interesting. Missy went there to testify
twice,
and the bill was going along just swimmingly. And then the whole Snowden affair happened. And it was like, oh, my God, they're tracking everything.
Yes, but I also reached out to a senator recently, Giovanno, who's a female senator, and she seemed like she was going to work it, and I've left her messages and stuff, and it's just not happening.
Okay. So those are the ones that it has been introduced but has not passed yet.
Right.
But then there's those that contact has been made, and that is Texas. What the hell, Texas?
Yeah. And here's the thing with that, Ronnie.
Really?
I
Texas?
present every year at the Dallas Crimes Against Children Conference. This is one of the biggest law enforcement conferences in the United States. There's over 6,000 law enforcement officials, actually from across the world, that show up in Dallas for this conference. And I give the seminar on the Kelsey Smith Act and Kelsey's case. And almost every single time I have law enforcement officers from Texas come up to me and go, why don't I have this act? And I said, I don't know. Why don't you? Who do we need to talk to?
There was a senator I contacted. I don't remember the name for that one, and sent all kinds of information, talked to her staffer, and she was like, okay, we're going to do this. I think it was a female. And then there was a male representative I reached out to because he proposed a law that basically the government couldn't track your cell phone for COVID. And I said, okay, this is a tie-in. And I sent him all kinds of information. And that's why I said contact had been made. Neither of them are responding. Yeah.
It's weird when I'm looking through this list, and you're right. This has nothing to do with right of the aisle or left of the aisle. I'm seeing red states. I'm seeing blue states here.
Yep.
Well, and I will tell you, in Nevada, it was now the AG, Aaron Ford. He is probably the most left-wing person you will ever meet, and he was very receptive and proposed the law and worked it. It doesn't have her name on it there because they don't do that, and that's okay. New Mexico, same thing.
So what did they call it?
It's just a law.
Whatever the law is, cell phone location.
So it's just a number.
Yeah.
That's okay.
That's
I don't
fine,
care.
as long as it serves the
Like
purpose.
Kentucky calls it the Leah Carter Act. There's a young lady who was swept away with floodwaters in her car, and they couldn't get the cell phone information from the company to find her, to try to locate her, and
Now, this is just a couple of years ago, so it's still happening.
And she died. And so they knew all about the Kelsey Smith Act, but they chose to name it Leah Carter because what happened in their state. I don't care what you call it.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's not, I get it. I mean, but it is Kelsey Smith Act.
Yeah.
Like,
Well,
right?
yeah,
You know what I mean? I see where you're going with it, but like, this is your work. This is her memory. Like this, like at the end of the day, let's save some lives, but
I reached out to the legislator that had sponsored the bill there afterwards, and I said, hey, I see that you have sponsored this bill, and I just want to let you know this is passed in, I think, 24 other states. And he said, yes, Mrs. Smith, we are well aware of the Kelsey Smith Act. All right, good, just so you know. I mean, it's the same wording. They obviously knew.
Yeah.
But in some states, it'll happen. I mean, some states we've been there. We've physically been there. We've testified in committee. But in other states, all of a sudden, we'll be like,
West Virginia.
yeah, we'll get a Google alert. The Kelsey Smith Act passed in West Virginia, and is like, how did that happen?
How does that happen?
Well,
they heard about it somewhere.
People do the research. There's an organization called the National Conference of State Legislators, and they provide ostensibly nonpartisan research for state legislators.
Okay.
And I was at a meeting for some kind of criminal law stuff as a law enforcement officer just a couple of years ago, and they had a representative from NCSL there, and on a break, I walked up to her and I said, hey, do you guys, I know you track all these issues and that, do you have anything on the Kelsey Smith Act? And she said, oh, yeah, I can get you what we have. They use our website.
Okay. Sure, let me go to kelseysarmy.org and I'll tell you everything you need to know there, Mr. Smith.
Yeah, and we were just at the sheriff's conference, like Greg said, and there was a gentleman there, and I'm just very blunt. We're walking through all the vendor area, and it's someone from the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center, and he's, I guess, their cell phone trainee. And so I'm just talking to him because if I see something that says communications, I'll stop and ask. And I said, oh, so have you ever heard of the Kelsey Smith Act? And he goes, yes. And I said, well, that's our daughter. And he goes, what? Yeah. They've heard of it. They know it. He said, I am well aware of that act. And I said, oh, good.
Wow. I'm really surprised at Texas. Really, really, really surprised at Texas.
Do you know a legislator there?
Well, and
I don't, but
the other thing you have to remember,
I know
about
people who
Texas,
live there, and that I feel like, well, that's where you start getting into that.
The other thing you have to remember about Texas, though, Ronnie, is their legislature only meets every other year.
Why?
Because that's how it's structured in their constitution.
Okay.
They don't meet every year.
Come on. It's the same thing. Is it Washington or Oregon? Which one of those meets every other year? Or Montana?
Montana.
You mean they're only in session every 2 years?
Correct.
Yeah.
They have a year that is for passing stuff, and then the second year they meet to do budget adjustments, but it's like for 10 days and then they're done.
That's New Mexico also, which it didn't pass there. That was Senator Mimi Stewart who proposed it, didn't work it. Who gets stuck in New Mexico for a snowstorm? Me. For real.
You're like basically in the desert,
or
and
like
you get a snowstorm.
Rhode Island.
Yeah.
You can live anywhere in the state and still drive to the Capitol in just a couple hours.
And no joke. I mean, Rhode Island's about the size of Kansas City. Not really, but what about, so did we talk about Arizona? I've got people I lived in Arizona. I got people listening to podcasts that are in Arizona.
It was, the AG at the time was Dan Levy, and he brought it to law enforcement, and they said, we don't want to mess with the relationship we have with the providers. But in all of these states, I can tell you, even since that time, I have reached out to legislators. Usually it's like the Judiciary Committee, or it'll be Utilities Committee. I will email every single one to try to get this information to them. I've done it to Mississippi. I've done it to Florida. I've done it to Idaho. I'm trying to remember the gray ones. I've done it in
California.
Texas. Yeah. Oh, California. I reached out to Melissa Menendez. She's a senator there. I've reached out to her staff, talked to them, and there were there was a Representative Glacier and one other person that I've reached out to their staff. Oh, yeah, we want to work this. Nothing.
Wow.
Yep, but that's California. So.
Yeah. So here are the states that don't have it passed, just for people who are listening, because I know we've bounced around. We'll start west and work our way east. So California, Idaho, Arizona, New Mexico. I should also include Alaska up there in the Northwest, Texas, Mississippi, Wisconsin, Michigan, Ohio, Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, District of Columbia, Maryland, Massachusetts, New York, Connecticut. No, not Connecticut. Sorry. Oh, no, it is Connecticut. Connecticut's also another one. And Maine and Vermont. Does that sound like all of them? That should be about 20 of them.
East Coast, West Coast. Well, no, on the West Coast, it's just California. So East Coast, California.
And the South.
Texas. Yeah.
Interesting.
And Alaska.
But you can find all of that at kelsey'sarmy.org, along with a lot of other information, especially about how you can get involved. I'm going to look at something here real quick. 2 hours and 33 minutes. Okay.
Sorry.
No, I'm the one who's sorry. I'm sorry, but it's fascinating and it's informative. And for the love of Kelsey Smith, we need to talk about it. So, how can people get involved? We've talked about calling your representatives, pushing it, bringing it up.
If you email us at kelseysarmy.org, the comments, or Missy at kelseysarmy.org, Greg at kelseysarmy.org, we can email you back a legislative packet that has all the information in it that you need to approach your legislator.
Okay. You got a golf classic.
We do. I think that's the old one. We're just
Coming
getting
up.
the new one
Yeah,
up.
that's
and
all right.
running.
We just had a charity golf tournament too, so I'm just going through the website again.
October 24th this year. It'll be out at Prairie Highlands Golf Course.
Is it sold out?
No, we haven't even
No, we
started
haven't got it up yet for this year. And we're always looking for sponsors and people that want to donate. We have a silent auction that's out there and all that kind of stuff. And the money from the golf tournament, that is our primary fundraiser for the entire year, and that helps pay for us to travel and do these conferences and speak and train law enforcement. And we also have all kinds, which is on the website as well. There's all kinds of training seminars for just people, regular folks, that we do for safety awareness and those types of things.
And I'll say it because I've gotten better about that. When we first started the foundation, I hated asking for money because I felt like I was selling her. And then I had to get to the point where we are not selling her. We have to have the money to be able to do the things we're doing. And I don't know about your golf classic. Ours doubled in price from the golf course because what was the one thing people could do during COVID?
Yeah, play golf.
You could go
be outside.
Yes. So we need more sponsors. We need more money this year because our price has doubled. And we need golfers.
What is the price per team roughly?
$150 per golfer.
That's a great price.
$600 per team.
Yeah, that's a great price.
That includes everything: breakfast, lunch, free beer all day.
Free beer all day?
Or until it runs out.
Is there Busch Light there? Well, you need to work on that. There's too much of a pause there. Busch Latte's always got to be number one on the list.
It's usually Budweiser product.
Well, it's an Anheuser-Busch product. That's fine. Okay, listen. Kelsey Smith Army, Kelsey Smith Foundation. I love it. I love what you guys are doing. What I really love is the no bullshit approach that you guys take and the passion that you have behind it. Naturally, I understand the passion, but you would think. How do I say this? You think the guy who served served in the United States Navy and 20 years in law enforcement is the brute, tough guy, which you are, but you're the first lady. Don't fuck with her.
No.
I was going to say it. Mom and Dad, if you're listening, sorry for dropping the F-bomb, but this is one gal you don't want to mess with. And I love you for that. You're quick on your heels. You're witty. You're fun. But you don't take any shit, and you know what you want, and you're going to do everything you can to get it, and don't ever stop. If there's one thing I've learned in in my professional career, is the fortune is in the follow-up, so don't ever give up. No doesn't mean never. It just means not right now.
Right.
So keep going.
All right. I'll reach out to you to ask you for some sponsors for our golf tournament.
You know that.
Yeah.
I will always do everything and anything I can at the time and leverage any of my resources to help.
Well, and I just want to say thank you because when everything first got started, I mean, you were with Q104 and you guys came out. No, seriously.
There's just a story that we need to tell about that, but we'll get to that in a second. Go ahead.
You guys were awesome.
You guys came out and that was actually the funding we needed to be able to start a foundation. People don't realize how expensive it was. And because of you guys broadcasting from there and Dean Litton, who was the director or the manager of the golf course, that gave us a foundation to be able to keep doing this for the last 15 years. Yep. So thank you.
Well,
guys.
Mike Kennedy actually had a major part in that, and we were just in his army. and was doing what we were told to do.
Mike was fantastic. I mean, the whole morning crew was out there back then. That was Mike, Zeke, and Jillian.
Yeah, absolutely. I got to tell this story though, because I will never forget this. And this is, we're trying to find humor in some of this stuff because we have to. How I really met Greg and Missy Smith. How I really met them.
Do we want to know this?
I know where it was.
No, you know that. You know that. So here's what really happened. I am actually at the time doing the night show at Q104. So I'm doing 7 to midnight. But on this particular day, which would have been, I don't know, maybe a couple weeks or shortly after, it wasn't long after Kelsey's passing.
Oh, it was his birthday, October 8th, 2007. I can tell you exactly when it was.
When you called the radio station? No. This is when you called the radio station.
Okay.
You don't know what happened. So you don't even remember. So I am filling in. I'm filling in for Shotgun Jackson doing the afternoon show, and I get a woman calling the request line. And you got to remember, I'm a radio personality. So I'm here, I'm diving in, I'm having some fun. And Missy had a really upbeat personality, and she was sounding sexy on the phone, and I'm flirting with her, and I'm like, "Woo, baby, what's going on?" And she's flirting back and all of this. I have no idea that this is a mother of an 18-year-old daughter who was just murdered. I have no idea. And so I'm just going along. Of course, I got the computer recording over here. I'm thinking this is going to be a nice little radio bit that I'm going to play back on the air. And then I'm like, yeah, so what's your name? And she's like, yeah, well, I'm looking for Mike Kennedy. My name is Missy Smith. And I wanted to die. I wanted to die right there. I just got done spending the last, 90 seconds, 2 minutes, whatever it was, flirting with this girl and telling, girl, you sound good. What you doing today? And she's like, oh, you sound good too. You don't remember this? No. Oh my gosh. I remember it because I wanted to die. I was like, oh my God, I am so sorry. And you're like, why? No, everything's fine. No. And I was just, I'm just trying to do this radio show. And no, you're fine. I'm like, yeah, now you want to talk to my boss. Now you want to talk to Mike Kennedy. Where's this going to go? And so I'm freaking out, thinking that I'm trying to call and talk to you about this foundation we're doing for my daughter who passed away. And your DJ is flirting with me on the phone. And I'm now going to have Mike walking into the studio going, what in the world did you do? So I'm like, I better get in there and tell him first. I'll be like, before you talk to Missy, I just got to let you know I had no idea it was her. I was just trying to do a bit on the air. I was just trying to do a little flirting. And she was flirting back, it was, I'm really sorry. And he's like, go back in the studio. Just, you're good. You're good. And so then,
you've been stressing me about that all these years. I don't even remember.
No. But it was the next time at Whiskey Tango, which is where you guys were getting ready to say, right? And that's when we got to come together. And I brought up, maybe you didn't hear me say it. It was a loud environment, whatever. But I was like, I brought up that night that I had when you had called in, and I was like, I just hope you know I was just doing my job, and we're all laughing. Maybe we had a couple cocktails. I don't know. We've forgotten about it, but we all bonded on that night, and ever since then, we've been friends. That is how I remember being introduced to the Smith family. That's how I was introduced to the Smith family. All right, let's wrap this.
I probably wasn't flirting that much because I've been married for...
Okay, so let me rephrase. When I say flirting, you were just playing along with the act that was going on. Again, I'm a radio personality. This is what I was paid to do. Anyway, so let's move on. It's a funny story, though. It really is. It's embarrassing for me, especially with right around the timing because I was humiliated. One of the reasons why you guys are here, and we're going to talk about this and then we're going to wrap this up, because I do want to talk about and I think Greg alluded to it a little bit earlier about the trauma that you can't control and the things that when something like this happens, There is a psychological side to it. And you had actually reached out to me because you had listened to the podcast that I had done that was discussing PTSD.
Yep.
And it must have had some sort of impact to you or on you. And you must have related to it in some capacity to where you felt inclined to reach out and say, I listened to the show. I love what you're doing. Keep doing what you're doing. And I was like, damn, I need to have Greg on the show. And so I would be remiss if I didn't talk about PTSD for at least a moment before we let you out of here. And I'm so sorry to keep you late, but you mentioned to me in your message that the PTSD was something that had been from your time in serving in the U.S. Navy and in the 20 years of doing U.S. military. I'm sorry, doing law enforcement rather. What effects did Kelsey's murder have on something that you were already struggling with?
Yeah, it's interesting because when I finally got the diagnosis, and I got the diagnosis in a weird way, I was having neck problems, and I went to my regular old primary physician, and she was checking a few things, asking me a few questions, and next thing I knew, I was crying in the office talking to the doctor.
Wow. When was this?
This was 2 years ago.
Yeah, about.
You were diagnosed 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Wow. So you'd been internalizing this.
Oh, probably for a long time.
What were the symptoms besides the neck issue?
He hit his wife in the head in his sleep.
I did. I punched her in bed.
real?
Oh, I thought it was like roll over and smack. Like you're saying you thought you were in a fight and you hit her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
For
my
real.
gosh.
Yeah.
And we'd been married 30 some years.
And did this happened in the last couple of years?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. And I bet you kicked his ass
It
after that,
happened.
didn't
No,
you?
Well, it happened right before COVID started because
Yeah.
I was going to therapy,
Yep.
and then I remember even talking a couple times when they first started talking about COVID. So that was the time frame when I was diagnosed. But the interesting thing is, primary physician at that time, her husband was a police officer, and so she picked up on a lot of things. She knew the questions to ask. And then part of my job that I do for the sheriff's office now is I'm part of peer support. So while I was probably helping other people without even realizing the situation that I was in, so I had some contacts. I knew some people to reach out to, and made contact with a therapist who's a former Navy SEAL. And maybe this is a plug or not, but
plug away.
His name is Walt Disney, honest to God.
Walt
Disney. He's a former Navy SEAL. But
how old is he?
He gets it.
Is it no relation to the Disney
he's
family?
Probably 10 years younger than me.
Okay.
But he gets it. He works with a lot of first responders, and veterans, so he understands that. But the interesting thing going through therapy with him was there were incidents that happened to me, particularly in law enforcement, that, as far as I knew, I had handled them just fine. But when it came to therapy and doing EMDR, which is just pure freaking magic, for me it worked so well.
What did you call it?
EMDR.
What is that?
I knew you were going to ask me.
Okay, so you don't have to tell me what the acronym is, but
it's eye movement, direction, something. I'd have to look it up.
What does it
again.
ultimately mean?
But it's basically you're moving your eyes back and forth, following a light or a pattern or a sound or something while you're talking.
So when a traumatic event happens, it's like a TBI, traumatic brain injury, and it breaks those signals in your brain and it doesn't file things right. So you have to reconnect those signals so that it files things correctly.
And the simple layman's theory is when we're in REM sleep at night, our eyes are moving back and forth. That's when our brain is filing stuff and putting it where it belongs. And when you have a traumatic incident, the filing system got broke, and the EMDR helps you refile where it belongs.
Wow.
It works for a lot of people, but there are some people it doesn't work for, but I call it pure fucking magic.
Like for real.
But it worked. It worked.
It worked. And
Yeah.
Walt,
Was it just that simple? You were
there's therapy, there's talking, there's emotion, there's crying, there's all that
So
stuff.
on a scale of 1 to 10, from 10 being cured, what level were you at after that?
Well, I am I don't think you ever are cured from PTSD.
What I'm trying to do
But
is
as far
figure out
as-
the significance of that
Yeah,
impact.
I would say a 10. Like, he's not hitting me anymore.
Okay, that's good.
It wasn't like ongoing. It was just once.
Yeah.
He responds to things better. He isn't as snappy,
Mm.
although he can be. And I can tell when he's having one of those PTSD moments, but he has learned the skills he needs to be able to better deal with them than to just file it away. Because he would tell me, why do you always have to talk about things so much? Why can't you not just put it in a box and put it up on the shelf and then you're done with it?
Yeah.
And I was like, no, that's not the way I function. Well, now that's not the way he functions. He's learned you can't just put it up in a box.
I would say I'm an 8, not a 10.
Okay. But that's 80% better than you were.
Yeah.
That's what I'm trying to get. I'm trying to figure out the significance of what this one procedure, the
Well, it's that procedure is part of it, but I mean, I still had to learn the skills that I need. Breathing is huge.
Breathing.
Oh my God.
I find myself, and look, I'm still a work in progress with my issues, but in probably the last couple months especially, I've noticed that when I get real tense, and I'm not trying to claim that I have PTSD, but I did get diagnosed with depression, that I get in those tense moments and the brain is just going all over the place. I will be sitting there and I'll catch myself not breathing.
Right.
Like not breathing. And then all of a sudden I'll go, and I'll be like, holy shit, that felt good. Like why wasn't I doing that before? What was it in my head that just told me, don't breathe?
I mean, one of the things Walt would have me do is when I walk to a door and I reach for the doorknob, five breaths.
Huh.
Just got in that habit. So when I do that, it's something I do.
So when you came to my door tonight,
subconsciously,
of course, I answered the door pretty quick, so you didn't get a chance to get 5 breaths in. But that's what you do every time you go to a doorknob.
But most of the time, yeah.
Yeah.
But breathing's huge. I mean, if you want to watch people that get breathing, watch a Major League Baseball game. Everybody does it. Pitchers, batters, fielders.
That's true.
They're all doing it.
That
I mean,
is
you
true.
watch Hunter Dozier every single time.
Yeah.
Before he bats.
Yeah.
And there
That's
were
true.
times, Ronnie, when everything was happening with Kelsey, if I feel overwhelmed, I would literally talk myself through it. In through the nose, out through the mouth.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's just like something connects there.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I would say to people, even with depression, I mean, why not try EMDR? It may work for you.
write
It
that
may
down.
not. But it could be a tool in your toolbox to help make things better.
Sure. Did you all right, I'm going to try to wrap this up. You talked about how in your time, mostly in law enforcement, so it wasn't as much from your time in the Navy.
No, not so much. I mean,
Okay.
I spent 10 years in the Navy. I was on submarines, which some people would say that's enough to cause PTSD probably. But,
Yeah.
But
You're a big guy. I don't know, like those. You got to be a small guy to be on a submarine. How did that work?
Hell, it works. It
Okay.
works.
Okay.
But he was in the Navy during the Cold War, so there was
it
not
wasn't any hot conflicts.
Oh,
Or
right.
anything,
Yeah,
It was
gotcha.
all Cold War stuff.
Gotcha.
So, but yeah, law enforcement. I saw a lot of things, dealt with a lot of things.
Can you again, if you're not comfortable, it's fine. But can you kind of give me an example of something that you saw that you felt like you handled just fine, but it caused trauma to where then it didn't get filed correctly in your mind?
Yeah, there was one incident where I wasn't even on duty that night. I was at home, and a friend of mine had stopped by that was on duty, and we were sitting out in the front yard, standing out in the front yard talking, and a call came in, and it sounded kind of like a hot call, and he says, hey, you want to go with me on this? At that time, the department I worked for, we didn't have much backup, so I was like, yeah, I'll go with you. Go. Long story short, a young kid, 18, 19 years old, had gone to his friend's house, knocked on the bedroom window of his friend, said, hey, I need to talk to you. The friend is in the bedroom with his girlfriend. They're watching a movie. He opens the window, and it's like, hey, whatever this kid's name was, I'll be out in a few minutes. I want to finish the movie, and then I'll come out and talk to you. They knew that he was having some issues. So the kid goes back out into his truck, and he's sitting there in the truck. Movie's over. His friend goes out. opens the passenger door, gets in, sits down, starts talking to him, puts his hand on his shoulder because he's not responding, and the light didn't come on when he got in the truck. His friend falls to the side, and this kid immediately freaks and goes into shock because what had happened is his buddy had gone over there to tell him goodbye, went back out on the truck, put a shotgun in his mouth, blew the top of his head off. His friend gets in, sits down in the truck. He's sitting in brain matter. Doesn't know it because the truck's dark because it blew out the light on the interior light on the inside. And so we're dealing with him. I helped get him in the house and telling his dad, hey, you really should get him out of these pants, and all this kind of stuff. I go back to help secure the crime scene. And I just remember thinking, here's this kid, and he from here up.
So the middle of his nose to the top of his forehead.
It's gone, all the way to the back of his head. There's nothing there. It's like this white porcelain punch bowl with red wine in it.
Wow.
That's what it looked like to me. That's the thought I had, as it kind of looks like a punch bowl. And, we secured the scene, did all that stuff, packed him up into body bag, got him out of there, all that. I went home, told Missy, well, that was some call,
How old were you at the time?
30-something. And
So he became a police officer on Kelsey's first birthday.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
For real. Yep.
Oh.
And
how long were you in with this particular example? How long had you been in law enforcement when that had happened?
When that happened, I had been in law enforcement for about 4 years.
That's what I was thinking, 4.
So 4 of the 20. Because is it fair to say because you told that story first that is one of the most significant, impactful memories that maybe weighs the most heavily on your mind?
It's one that did. It doesn't now, which is why I can talk about it.
Yeah.
There were a couple other.
But the struggle you had with it is,
The interesting things were the things that came up in therapy, like that story and a couple others I can think of. Every single one of those that turned out to be a trigger point for me or an issue for me were all things that I thought I handled.
Why did you think that?
Because I wasn't having like reoccurring thoughts about it or anything like that.
You didn't have any depression, any anxiety?
I could tell you several incidences where he came home and there was one where a young man was shot in a drive-by, and Greg is helping the mother. It's right at the high school, first thing in the morning, and he came home and said, I was basically blowing smoke up the mother's ass as I know her son is dying. That incident he processed and worked through that day. So I think there were some where he did, but those that he didn't are what caused.
Yeah, the ones that didn't file right, for whatever reason, were the ones, and were there things about Kelsey that didn't file right? Absolutely.
That's where we need to get to next. Yes,
absolutely. But to me, one of the biggest wow factors, shock factors for me was the things that were putting me in that where I was snappy all the time or isolation is a huge symptom for PTSD. It's just stay away from people. Just don't even bother me.
He would just, when our grandkids come over, we both have hearing loss since Kels, and it does get loud and sometimes overwhelming. He would just go to the bedroom, stay away from everybody. And I'm like, oh, no. We are not having that.
Yeah, I can understand why you'd feel that way. I can tell you that I sometimes feel like that. Sometimes I feel like when Rachel, my wife, comes in the door and then there's the 3 kids and you saw how it can get a little there.
Yep.
Got the baby crying, wah, I need a bottle. And Rhett's pissed off because the baby's getting attention and he isn't. And Reagan's just an 8-year-old girl and she's got that really high pitched voice. And I'm like, I feel like the temples in my head are going to explode. My eyeballs are going to bust out and I don't have the mental capacity for this. I want to run away. And you're saying that I've tried that. I want you to know I need to do it more probably. But I guess what I'm saying is I get where you're feeling with that.
Yep.
And what you're saying then the EMDR was a huge factor of that. Learning to breathe more frequently and taking those deep breaths was a huge factor in getting over that.
Just being aware of the different coping strategies that are out there, and there's tons of them, and some will work for some people and some won't.
Are you medicated?
No.
So everything you've done is taken a holistic approach.
When I was first diagnosed, before I got to the therapist, before I started seeing Walt, I was on medication to help me sleep.
Okay.
Because I didn't sleep well. And I think the second time I met with Walt, he was like, "Do you think you need that medication?" And I said, "I don't know. My doctor gave it to me, so I'm assuming I'm supposed to have it." And he said, "Let's see if we can get you to go to sleep without it." And I'm like, "Okay, I'm willing. I'll try."
Sure.
And I think that's a huge part there too. You have to be willing to make the changes that you need to make. If you're not at that point where you're willing to make those changes, then I don't care what you do. I don't think it'll work. If you're not willing.
The change could also be medication because
Yeah, some people may need that. I'm not down talking medication. I'm just saying you have to be willing, you have to accept what the therapist is telling you. And in order to do that, you have to have a good relationship with that therapist. And if the first one, if you're not feeling it with that first therapist, then go to a new one, get another one until you find the one that you connect with, because that's a crucial part of it. I mean, Walt and I connected on so many levels. He's former Navy. He's a SEAL. I was on submarines. We used to take SEALs different places, so I've been around SEALs. He gets law enforcement. I mean, there were just so many things that we
connected on. Yeah. So was hitting Missy in your sleep? I'm sorry, I shouldn't laugh at that. But
no, you can laugh.
Was that the breaking moment?
It was for me. Yeah, I was absolutely mortified.
Well, I can imagine, because I know how much you love her.
And then he calls me from the doctor's office when she stepped out, and he said, "She diagnosed me with PTSD," and I said, "No." Really? And he
so
said,
sympathetic.
Yeah, so much empathy there, Missy. She's like, "I should have a PhD. I could have diagnosed you 20 years ago on this."
Well, and then she came back in and she talked to him and gave him this book that would really help with it. And when he got home, I said to him, "The book's on its way. It should be here tomorrow." It was ordered before he even made it home.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's better now than it was, but particularly back in the early 90s when I started in law enforcement, the thought process was, okay, so you've just been involved in a shooting, or you just responded to a terrible scene like the one I described. Go home, drink some beer, you'll be fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
there was a lot of that. I'll be honest. There was a lot of that.
I mean, we had a lot of choir practice. Yeah.
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 I
feel like that was like a generation of years of many generations. But I talk about this on my podcast frequently. I feel like that there's a certain generation that we grow up, like I'm 46. I know you guys are a little bit older than that, but like there's a generation of like, hey, men don't show their emotions. We're taught not to show our emotions. And I'm not saying my parents did anything wrong. That's probably how his parents, they were farmers and hard workers, and you don't share your emotions. You rub some dirt on you just get to work.
That's funny you say that, because he and Kelsey that last year of her life really went at it, because she was a crier. Like, she would cry over anything.
Drove me nuts.
And he would say, "Damn it, Kelsey, you're just pissed because I'm crying," and then it hurts.
Yeah, you were trying to toughen her up.
Yeah. Well, and then at her funeral, he said, "I understand the crying."
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and that, I'm not trying to make this about me, but it's the thing that is it's the benchmark reason, staple reason for why I'm even doing this podcast, because I internalized a lot of things that had happened to me that eventually took a physical effect on my body.
It does.
And I realized that there was so much shame that I was holding in because I had failed, or at least I felt like a failure. And anyway, blah, 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 on and on and on. The point is, internalizing is destructive. It is so destructive. And if I would have known what I know now, it would have been a whole different approach. And so I appreciate the fact, I'm sorry that it took Missy getting hit for it to happen, but I appreciate the fact that you are recognizing the importance of opening up and the fact that, I mean, for some guy, like even for me, like me talking about it right now, I still cringe inside. I'm like, oh my
yeah,
God.
but here's the thing, Ronnie.
But it's got to be hard for you too, a little bit, isn't it? Like you're vulnerable. You were years that you were like that.
And again, you know, here's the thing. Back in the '90s, when I was, you know, I was the big tough guy chasing bad guys on the street, and doing all that kind of stuff. You know, we would. I mean, I can remember a group of us sitting around the pool drinking beer, and all of us talking about some bad call that we'd had in the last 2 or 3 weeks. And so, you know, was that a form of therapy? Maybe. You know, I can even remember a conversation where I said, we probably all have some kind of PTSD. And that was back in the 90s.
Yeah.
You know, so you have to realize that where you're at with it, you have to accept what you need to do to change it. And there's a faith component in there as well, because, you know, it's like the serenity prayer. The things you can change, you can change. The things you can't, you got to learn to accept.
Yeah.
Well, and that's what I was just going to say about when you said you wish you'd have done things differently, and that if you change any one thing in your life where you were at, you change everything. You may not have Rhett. You may not have Riley, because the whole thing changes. You wouldn't have this podcast, and you don't know how many people you're helping with it. So you can't change any of it.
That's so true. And here's the thing. When I started the podcast, I wish that I could say that I premeditated that I'm going to do this podcast to help other people. And it's just simply not the truth. I admit it. I wish I could say that is the truth, and it's not. What I did by starting the podcast was try to find something, because being that I was 22 years and doing radio, I have a natural ability to do this kind of radio thing.
Right.
And it gets me back to my roots and making me feel good about doing something that I'm maybe not good at, but at least halfway decent at. And I was trying to find something to make myself feel good about myself, like I had purpose in life again, and at the same time, challenge myself to being open about something that I had been internalizing for a long time. And in the process of doing all of that, because it was going to be medicine for me, I learned, wow, I'm helping the amount of people that have reached out. And I'm not going to embellish it. It's not like it's thousands of people, but it's more people than I can count on 2 hands.
We're right there with you.
That have reached it. Yeah, exactly.
That's the Kelsey Smith Act. That's
100%.
why we talk to people about her case, because we don't know. And just like, you know, you said, wow, that's what we get when we get the feedback.
Yeah.
There's a quote that I do in every presentation I do to law enforcement. And it's from a bereaved dads group. And he says, I have to talk about it. I have to let it out. I have to cry. I have to celebrate his life. And along the way, I hope I help some people. And that's the reason I get up on the stage at these conferences in front of hundreds or sometimes thousands of people and walk through the details of her case with law enforcement.
Yeah.
For all of those reasons.
I genuinely love you too. And we have set a record that in the first 9 episodes of the Papa Ron podcast, we are now the longest. This is now the longest episode. It has exceeded 3 hours. So we're going to wrap this up. By doing so, I want you to take this quick second to make any plugs. We've talked about kelsey'sarmy.org. Is there any social platforms? Is there any events that are coming up? I know you talked about the golf course or the golf tournament. Whatever's on your heart, whatever's on your mind, let's go ahead and get it out there now in closing.
Yeah, you can find it besides the website. You can find us on Facebook. You can find us on LinkedIn.
You can find information about her law on Facebook, Kelsey's Law. The plug I would make is, just like everything else, we need money. We just got to have money to be able to do the things we do. And as much as I hate asking, you can go to kelsey'sarmy.org. There's a donate button. And just, you know, we have 10,000 followers on Facebook. If everybody on Facebook gave $1, that would help tremendously.
Yeah.
$1. That's all I'm asking.
I don't know how many people listen to this podcast. It might be a couple hundred people, but yeah, I could maybe raise $200 for you. That's what I'm ultimately trying to say.
Better than nothing.
Hey, thank you guys for being here. I know you got to get up early. You got to be somewhere to what is it? What was it you were hosting? Or
National Sheriff's Association Conference.
I saw that you brought some things in. Were you wanting to show something? Or
Oh, these are for you.
Oh my gosh, you brought gifts?
Well, no.
Well,
you
actually,
got one thing you wanted to show.
Yeah, show me what you got real quick.
There, we won an award.
Oh, wow.
From the National Emergency Number Association, the Presidential Award.
Hold that. I don't know if that camera is still on,
Sure.
but hold that up right there, and then
That's why we were in Louisville.
show it to that camera right over there. Awesome.
Right there.
Yeah, there you go. And what was that for?
Kelsey's Law.
Oh, nice.
Because
basically, it's an association of 911 folks,
Right.
operators around the United States, and we won their award for helping save lives with the Kelsey Smith Act.
I love it.
Yep.
I love it. Thank you guys so much. I
Thank you.
appreciate it. This has been, I want to do this again because I feel like there was so much more we could have talked about that we really didn't get a chance to do. So we're going to wrap it up. This is episode 9 of the Papa Ron podcast. I want to thank again Donovan in San Francisco for helping me with the production elements, along with Rich Hunter. I need to also thank Marathon Media Management, my boy Dakota Thurn and Quentin Verlinick with helping with the video portion of this, and my guests, Greg and Missy Smith. Thank you for listening to the Papa Ron podcast.
You've been listening to the Papa Ron podcast. If you enjoyed this show, hit subscribe now and tell your friends on Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, and other social platforms. To participate on the show, leave a message with your comments or questions by calling or texting 816-558-6389. That's 816-558-6389. Until next time, thanks for listening to the Papa Ron podcast.